Chapter 1492 Level 4. Chapter 1492 Level 4 Author's Note. Do not unlock this, Endrick pointed out, is not just any location. Nereus sector serves as a nexus for black market exchanges. Crime rates are astronomical, around 90%, and it operates under a constant state of lawlessness. The rotating model displayed sections of the sector, each a hub of various illicit activities. Markets brimming with stolen artifacts, underground fighting rings, and dens offering every imaginable vice, painted a vivid picture of controlled chaos. Gustav folded his arms, his gaze locked on the floating model. A place like this might just tear itself apart without any outside help. Letting Kari's wreak havoc there might seem like a self-solving problem. As he voiced this thought, the injured guard, who had been silently observing, interjected weakly but with conviction. I understand the temptation to look the other way, but you must consider Nereus is also a ground for trafficking innocent children from across the universe. They are sold to the highest bidder, living lives of despair. If Kari's unleashes that mineral's power there, those children will suffer most. The room fell silent, the moral weight of the guard's words settling among them. Rhea turned to look at Gustav with a troubled expression. We can't just turn our backs on them. Falco nodded in agreement. We need to think this through. Although we could leave it to them to clean up their mess, there is no guarantee they'd get to her before the deed is done. Innocents, especially children, shouldn't pay the price for our indecision. Gustav sighed, rubbing his temples as he contemplated their options. We have two choices: intervene and potentially save lives at great risk to ourselves, or stay our course and let Nereus deal with its own demons, including Kari's. If we do decide to intervene, we'll need to do so now and fast so we can stay on course and get to the location before the warp demolator appears, Endrick voiced. How long will it take us to get to Nereus sector? Gustav questioned their ship's artificial intelligence. Less than 4 days of interstellar travel. Technically we should be back on course in about a week, Endrick pointed out. Are we doing this? Eldris inquired. They all turned to face Gustav. All right, sure, let's do it, Gustav stated before sitting at his usual spot in the control room. Set a course for Nereus sector. Back at the site of the recent devastating attack, a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen shadows, a remarkable change was unfolding. Amid the debris and the silence of dead space, a figure that had been motionless among the scattered remains of the destroyed prison transport began to stir. The figure was enshrouded in a tattered uniform, the fabric scorched and torn from the violent events that had led to the vessel's demise. The interior was a grisly display, the walls and ceilings charred black, the metal warped from intense heat. It was clear that whatever had occurred there had unleashed catastrophic energies, far beyond ordinary weaponry. The corridors of the space transport vessel were narrow and claustrophobic, designed for functionality over comfort, typical of military-grade transports. As they advanced, scorch marks scored the walls, and in some areas, half-burnt corpses were melded grotesquely with the ship's superstructure, their faces locked in expressions of agony, their skin blackened to the bone. Some of these burns suggest an explosion of immense heat from the inside, Eldris observed, his voice echoing slightly in the hollow space. Look at the blast patterns, they radiate outward from the ship's core. Endrick nodded in agreement. The internal defenses would have contained any external attack. This was something else, something from within. As they navigated through the debris-strewn hallways, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft crunch of their boots on fragments of metal and ash. Suddenly, Rhea paused, his sights settling on a figure slumped against the bulkhead. It was a guard, one of the ship's crew, by the look of his uniform. Despite the severe burns that charred his blue skin, a testament to his alien heritage, his chest rose and fell weakly, the barest hint of life. "He's still alive," he exclaimed, rushing to his side. Rhea carefully turned him over to assess his condition better. The guard's uniform was a patchwork of charred fabric and melted synthetics, the emblem of the security firm barely distinguishable. His features, distinctly Thelmarian, were resilient yet clearly ravaged by the event. The Thelmarian species were known for their thick skin and robust physiques, characteristics that had possibly saved his life amid such devastation. Gustav squatted beside Rhea, examining the guard. "Can you hear me?" he asked, gently tapping the guard's face. The guard's eyes fluttered open, his gaze unfocused, pain flickering across his features. "Ryan." The guard murmured hoarsely, the effort to speak seeming to drain his remaining strength before his eyes rolled back, and he passed out again. "Ryan? What does that mean?" Eldris questioned, looking over to Gustav for theories. "Could be a name, a place, or something else we're not aware of," Gustav mused, his mind racing through possibilities. "We should get him back to our ship," Endrik suggested. All right," Gustav agreed, seeing as there was no other way the guard could be saved. He would die if they just left him there. With the guard secured on Endrik's shoulder, they made their way back to their ship. The damage to the vessel, the nature of the guard's injuries, and his cryptic last word before losing consciousness all pointed to a mystery that was deepening by the moment. Endrik checked for any other survivors, but they discovered that only the guard was alive. Many prisoners in cells were burnt to a crisp as well. Whatever happened on that transport ship wasn't an accident. It was deliberate and powerful enough to bypass all their internal defenses, Gustav stated upon their arrival back on the ship. "We need to figure out who or what Ryan is," Rhea added. "It isn't really our place to do that. But I am okay with helping the guard to recover," Gustav voiced while placing some healing medication in the mouth of the guard. "And we need to be on guard. If something on that ship could cause this much destruction, it's not something we want to encounter unprepared," Eldris chipped in. "Which is why I believe we should find out what Ryan is so we won't get thrown into the unexpected," Endrik added. Gustav also saw sense in what they said and agreed that they would ask the guard some questions when he came to. However, at the time, they needed to continue their journey. After several hours of cruising away from the haunting wreckage, the tranquility of space enveloped their spacecraft. Gustav had resolved to drop the injured guard off at the nearest habitable planet, believing that it would spare them any further complications. However, his plans quickly changed when the guard regained consciousness sooner than expected. Endrik's voice cut through the ship's intercom, "Hes awake." The group converged on the medical bay where the guard was hooked up to various monitors and 4 lines, his burnt skin treated with regenerative gels. The relief of consciousness brought a flicker of urgency to his eyes as he scanned the room, registering the faces of his unexpected saviors. Gustav approached the medical bed, his expression one of cautious concern. "You're awake. That's good. Can you tell us what happened on your ship?" The guard's voice was weak but filled with a grave urgency. "Ryan," he muttered again, the word resonant with dread. Rhea stepped forward. "You said that before. What is Ryan? Is it a person?" The guard shook his head slowly, his breath laboring with each word. "Ryan, it's not a place. It's a rare mineral. We were transporting it when one of the prisoners stole it." Gustav's brow furrowed deeply. A prisoner hijacked an entire vessel for a mineral? What's so special about this Ryan? "It's not just any mineral," the guard continued, his voice gaining strength from his urgency. "Ryan is an absorbent. It takes whatever it gets and magnifies it. It's incredibly valuable and dangerous in the wrong hands. The prisoner who stole it. She planned her capture and transport just to get close to it." Endrik interjected, "Who is this prisoner? And where might she have taken the Ryan now?" The guard's eyes were haunted as he recalled the events. "Her name is Karis. She's a Zaltharian, known for her cunning and ruthlessness. She has ties to several outlaw factions across the quadrant." Falco, leaning against a console, crossed his arms. "Zaltharians, her? Slippery folks. Any idea where she might head with such a prize?" The guard winced as he shifted slightly, pain flaring across his features. "She mentioned the Nereus sector once. It is where she grew up and she is said to despise its existence." Endrik instructed the ship's artificial intelligence, AI, display every data available on the Nereus sector. The air above the console shimmered as a detailed holographic image materialized. The Nereus sector spun slowly in front of them, a massive artificial orbital body, its architecture a patchwork of scavenged spaceship parts and makeshift habitats. It looked like a pirate's haven floating in space, lit by neon glows from numerous sketchy establishments. Chapter 1493 Top Floor Infiltration. Chapter 1493 Top Floor Infiltration. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Taking him by force? The Earth is amongst the Alliance leaders, so wouldn't this cause an internal issue? Eldris voiced thoughtfully. Endrick nodded in agreement. Both sides have selfish motives as regards to this situation. However, I wouldn't want a case where conflict breaks out and Rhea gets caught in the middle. We need to find a way to solve this quietly. He looked towards them with determination in his eyes. Then we need to come up with a new plan. He stood up and grabbed a small device from his desk. Let me show you something, he said, activating the device. A series of holographic images and videos began to play, filling the room with scenes from Gustav's activities this past year. The first hologram showed Gustav saving a group of stranded aliens from a collapsing space station. Another depicted him relocating an entire planet out of orbit. Another showed him engaging sea filing. Another showed him on planet Vespa. The scenes continued, each one showcasing Gustav's heroic deeds in different locations outside of Earth. These are just a few of the things Gustav has done in the past year, said, his voice filled with admiration. My initial plan was to present all this evidence to the MBO to advocate for Gustav's innocence and clear his name as a universal fugitive. Eldris watched the holograms with a thoughtful expression. This is compelling evidence, But you mentioned there was one last piece you needed to prove, that Gustav isn't affiliated with the Gustavo Alliance. Nodded. Exactly. That's why Elevra went off-planet. She's gathering concrete evidence to show that Gustav has no ties to the Gustavo Alliance. With her findings and the evidence we already have, I believe we can clear Gustav's name and secure Rhea's release. Falco crossed his arms, a skeptical look on his face. It's a good plan, but the last part is a long shot. Finding definitive proof that Gustav isn't connected to the Alliance could take too long. If it is even successful at all. Sighed. I know. That's why I said we will need a new plan. Eldris leaned forward, his eyes focused. We talked about finding the location of the Alliance earlier. Maybe that's our best option. Looked at him, curiosity piqued. Are you suggesting we infiltrate the Alliance and break Rhea out? Falco nodded confidently. It seems like the best option we have. Considered the idea for a moment. If we do that, it could de-escalate the conflict. But finding the Alliance's location is almost impossible. Only the Grand Commanders and General Chell know where it is. Endrick spoke up with a calm and measured voice. Even if we find the location, getting in and out without being noticed would be extremely difficult. But right now, we need to focus on one thing at a time. Our priority should be getting information about the location. They brainstormed ideas and the tension in the room rose as they discussed various strategies. Glanced at them, a hint of a smile on his face. You know, there is one person who might be able to help us, Commander Xanatus. He's the only high-ranking officer who's been on our side so far. Eldris nodded. I remember he is close with Gustav. Commander Xanatus could be our key to getting the information we need. Endrick added, but we can't just ask Commander Xanatus to get the information because it might get suspicious if he asks General Chell out of the blue. We need to come up with a way he can get it without being Suze. He looked around as the plan slowly came together in his mind. We need to tell Commander Xanatus about our motives first. Falco leaned back. I agree. We could pull this off. Nodded. All right. Let's get in touch with Commander Xanatus and start laying the groundwork for our plan. The next day, Commander Xanatus looked up as entered his office. He motioned for to sit down. Commander Xanatus, began, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Of course, Commander Xanatus replied with a calm but curious tone. What brings you here? Took a deep breath and launched into an explanation of their situation, detailing the trio's return and their urgent need to locate the Alliance. He also presented his plan to advocate for Gustav's innocence using the evidence he had gathered and was still gathering. Commander Xanatus listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When finished, he leaned back in his chair. You've put together a compelling case, EE. However, locating the Alliance is no simple matter. I know, EE agreed. That's why we need your help. We know that we can only find its location through General Chell. Commander Xanatos had a thoughtful look as silence ensued between them for a few seconds. Even I am not sure about getting the location from General Chell. He is not so foolish that he wouldn't suspect anything should I approach him. However, Commander Xanatos paused briefly. There is a way we can get this information. Although risky too, it has better chances of succeeding, he added. Imaulia's commander, EE stated. The spacecraft General Chell last used to travel to the Alliance. If we can access it, we might be able to extract the last coordinates and pinpoint the location, Commander Xanatos revealed. EE eyes twinkled in understanding. Truly this could work. Commander Xanatos nodded slowly. The higher-up spacecrafts are kept on the floor above, in a highly restricted area. Regular MBO officers aren't allowed up there. How do we get in? EE asked, leaning forward. I can grant you access, Commander Xanatos said. But you'll need to move quickly and discreetly. If the spacecraft hasn't been flown elsewhere since General Chell's last visit, you should be able to extract the coordinates. However, if it has, this plan won't work. EE nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. We're ready to take that risk. Remember not to use your spatial abilities. It will trigger an alarm. From down here, I will interfere with the cams so you won't be spotted. Commander Xanatos gave EE a stern warning while he nodded in response. Commander Xanatos proceeded to stand and walked over to a secure cabinet. He retrieved a small device and handed it to EE. This will give you temporary access to the restricted floor. Use it wisely. Once you have the coordinates, return here immediately. EE accepted the device, feeling a surge of determination. Thank you, Commander. We won't let you down. With the access device in hand, EE made his way to the floor above, taking a private teleportation elevator that sent him directly into a pristine hangar. The hangar was a marvel of modern engineering, housing some of the most advanced spacecraft in the MBO. Each one gleamed under the bright overhead lights. EE moved quickly, his eyes scanning the names and designs of the spacecrafts until he spotted the one he was looking for. General Chell's ship was house-sized and imposing, with the emblem of the MBO emblazoned on its side. He approached the ship and used the access device to open the hatch. The interior was as impressive as the exterior, filled with state-of-the-art navigation and communication equipment. EE wasted no time, moving to the control panel and accessing the navigation logs. His fingers flew over the controls as he searched for the last set of coordinates. The screen flashed with a series of numbers and symbols, and he quickly transferred the data to a button-sized drive. Just as he was about to exit, he heard footsteps approaching. Someone's coming. EE almost instinctively opened a vortex when he recalled Commander Xanatos' warning. Damn it. His heart raced as he quickly hid behind a console. The hatch opened, and two MBO officers entered, chatting casually. They didn't seem to notice anything amiss as they moved about the ship, performing routine checks. EE held his breath, waiting for them to leave. While checking, one of them began to approach the exact spot where he hid. This is bad. EE crouched tighter, trying his best to be as silent as possible while the footsteps grew louder. Leo, see what I found, the officer suddenly yelled, causing EE's heart to skip a beat. He steeled himself as he prepared to attack the two so as to make sure it was never discovered that he was here. Oh, a cherry lollipop. Who knew that the general had a sweet tooth? Officer Leo voiced while staring at where the other officer pointed at. I dibs since I found it first. The officer snatched the lollipop from the top of the console and turned around. Humor, you stingy bastard. Officer Leo shook his head. EE racing mind began to calm as he realized he wasn't discovered. He nearly let out a sigh of relief. Chapter 1494 That's What I Like. Chapter 1494 That's What I Like. Author's note. Do not unlock. After what felt like an eternity, the officers finished their checks and exited the ship. SS, when you turned me in, did you know I was carrying your child? Zenith staggered as if struck, his face paling. Our child. I didn't know, Kari's. I swear I didn't know. Tears shimmered in Karis' large, teal eyes, not of sorrow but of rage. I lost our baby, Vlad, in a maximum security transport. Do you understand what that means? The conditions, they were merciless. No medical care, no compassion. Our child didn't stand a chance. Zenith looked as if he might collapse, his hands clenching into fists. Kari's, a life for a life, Vlad, Kari's hissed, her voice rising. You will pay dearly. Before the situation could escalate further, Gustav stepped between them, his demeanor authoritative yet calm. No one is paying anything until we sort out the situation with the Ryan. Where is it, Kari's? Kari's turned her gaze to Gustav, her expression shifting to one of mocking amusement. She laughed, a sound that echoed eerily against the metal walls. The Ryan? Oh, it's not with me. Gustav frowned, his patience thinning. What do you mean by it's not with you? Her laughter grew louder, more unhinged, as she looked around at the bewildered faces. Then, abruptly, she stopped, her expression settling into a crazed calm. That's all you get from me. Gustav studied her, a sense of unease growing within him. Her laughter had been too raw, too deranged. It was clear that whatever had happened to the Ryan, it was a piece of this puzzle that was deeply troubling. Kari's, this isn't a game, Gustav said firmly. We need to know about the Ryan to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. It's dangerous. Karis' lips twisted into a sardonic smile. Dangerous doesn't begin to cover it, pretty boy. But you'll find out soon enough on your own. The standoff in the warehouse seemed to freeze time as everyone processed the implications of Karis' words. The stakes were clearly higher than any of them had anticipated, and with Kari's unwilling to reveal more, they were left with more questions than answers. Gustav turned back to his group, nodding for them to continue securing the area and to keep both Zenith and Kari's under close watch. We need to figure out where the Ryan could be. Who she has been in contact with, since she is definitely not alone in this. In the tense atmosphere of the warehouse, where revelations and confrontations had just unraveled the complex web of their mission, the man they knew as Aram, still in the periphery of the unfolding drama, stepped forward. His movement was casual, but his intentions were anything but. I want to try something, he said, his voice calm yet carrying an undercurrent of urgency. Karis' reaction was immediate and visceral. Her eyes widened in recognition, and as she opened her mouth to speak, possibly to call out his name or issue a warning, but the man moved swiftly, covering her mouth with his hand and silencing her before any name could escape her lips. You traitor! You will show me where the Ryan is, Aram whispered in her ears. The suddenness of his action caught everyone off guard. Gustav, Eldris, and Endrik turned to watch, their suspicion instantly flaring up, but before they could react, the person they knew as Aram acted. He pulled from his pocket a small, reflective object that looked like a mirror. With a deft flick of his wrist, he tossed it onto the hard floor. The object shattered with a sharp clang, and from the broken fragments, a blinding flash of light erupted, enveloping him and Kari's. In an instant, both figures vanished, leaving behind only the twinkling shards of the broken mirror and a room full of stunned allies. What just happened? Eldris exclaimed, his voice echoing off the walls of the now quiet warehouse. Where did they go? Endrik added, moving towards the spot where the two had stood, as if he might find some clue in the fragments that remained. Before anyone could process the situation fully, the sound of heavy boots filled the air, and a squad of armored Triton guards stormed into the warehouse, their weapons drawn and faces set in grim determination. The leader of the squad, an alien with a humanoid physique and glowing eyes with the insignia of a high-ranking officer, stepped forward. Officer Aram, he announced, scanning the room and taking stock of the situation. This declaration caused a ripple of confusion among Gustav's group. Endrik turned to Gustav, his expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. What? That's Officer Aram? Then who the hell was? Gustav slightly raised a hand to silence him, his face betraying none of the surprise that the others felt. Our Aram was an imposter, he said simply. You knew about the fake Aram? Eldris inquired. Gustav nodded, his gaze steady as he looked at each of them. Yes, I had my suspicions. Yesterday, I met with a guard named Sale who brought me to the real Officer Aram. It was then we devised a plan to see what this imposter was really up to. He voiced while his mind reeled back to yesterday's events. We need to act quickly, Aram stated. He could compromise our retrieval operation. What do you propose, Gustav? Gustav leaned over the table, his mind clear. While this is no longer officially any business of mine, I don't like people thinking thieves successfully played me for a fool. A smirk appeared on his face as he spoke with a cold tone. Let's set a trap. He believes Hez successfully fooled my team, he'll likely make a move tomorrow, meanwhile we'll pretend to not to see it coming. Or rather I will. Aram nodded, appreciating the strategy. And we'll be ready to intercept him when he makes his move. No. He has to believe that his move worked. When he does make his move, we'll let him leave with a false sense of success, Gustav stated. I have a feeling we'll meet Kari's tomorrow. If this plays out as planned, everything will be revealed and the Ryan as well as your prisoner will be retrieved with added bonus, Gustav added. But what if he gets away? Officer Aram was a bit skeptical about the whole thing. He won't, Gustav stated confidently. The plan was swiftly put into motion, with details hashed out and roles assigned. Triton operatives wouldn't be showing up until afterwards, but they'll lurk around the vicinity. This would ensure that Thalos still makes his move without being spooked. Falco, leaning against a nearby crate, crossed his arms. So, this was like a sting operation? You expected him to make a move? Exactly, Gustav confirmed. We needed to know his endgame without alerting him that we were onto him. Rhea, who had been quietly processing the events, chimed in, and all this time, we were just waiting to see when he'd reveal his hand. Clever. But how did you ensure he wouldn't just disappear with Kari's without a trace? Gustav's lips curled into a slight smile at Rhea's astute question. Tracking him conventionally wouldn't work. Eldris raised an eyebrow. Did you put some kind of tracker on him? Shaking his head, Gustav explained, no, a traditional tracker would have been useless given his abilities. Thalos moves between a certain type of dimension that blocks such attempts. Instead, I used a more personal method. His life sign is imprinted into my god eyes. Life signs? Endrick echoed with a surprised expression. You can see life signs? Falco and Rhea were clueless about what this meant, but Endrick and Eldris seemed to be well aware. This was an ability Gustav acquired years back, but they had no idea. Eldris and Endiak felt it made sense now since Gustav was able to link them and pinpoint their locations back in planet Osius. He never did tell them the details, but now they had come to a realization. You mean you can sense where he is now? Eldris inquired. Yes, Gustav replied. Once I activate life signs tracking, I will be able to tell wherever he is, feel his presence and even see through him. Falco whistled softly, impressed. That's intense. So, you can actually feel him? Like, physically? It's more like a persistent echo of his life force, Gustav elaborated. I can tell you exactly what he's doing and see his environment through him. I can also feel the direction and distance enough to track him down again. The group digested this information, the weight of Gustav's words sinking in. It reminded them once more of just how powerful Gustav was, but also made them internally question why he didn't use it when Falco and Angie got taken. So, what's the next step? Eldris asked, looking around at the rest of the group. Thalos, the person we've been calling Aram, wasn't just impersonating an officer, he was one of the fake guards that infiltrated the transport vessel to help Kari's escape. Endrick leaned forward, his interest piqued. So he was working with her from the inside. What's their endgame? He was. Gustav confirmed, his eyes scanning his group, ensuring he had their full attention. Chapter 1495 Arriving at Dietrich's Party. Chapter 1495 Arriving at Dietrich's Party. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Stark stroked his chin. Well, they can't be on the ship all the time, now can they? Yeah. Hopefully they are fine, but it's possible they're not on the ship right now. I'll try again later. Gustav took a deep breath before turning around. Let's head out, Gustav voiced. Meanwhile, Back on Earth, Eldris and EE were making their own preparations. Atrihia City is about 30 minutes flight from here, Eldris said, checking the coordinates on his handheld device. We should arrive well before the party starts. EE nodded with a serious expression. Since we are both headed there as MBO officers, we shouldn't encounter any trouble. Eldris nodded. I've already arranged for a private landing pad. We'll be in and out without any issues. EE snapped his fingers and Vortex appeared before them. Or we could just use this, he suggested. Appearances in a certain fashion is sometimes important. In this case, it is, Eldris replied. He proceeded to tell EE where his aircraft was located and EE opened a vortex to there instead. They instantly arrived in the private hangar where Eldris' aircraft was stored. The aircraft had a shimmering blue exterior and seemed to be one of the most recent models from the leading technological group in Plankton City. Let's get going, EE said, climbing into the co-pilot's seat. Eldris took the pilot's seat and activated the controls. The aircraft's engines roared to life, and they smoothly lifted off the ground, soaring into the sky. As they flew, the landscape below slowly transformed from the urban sprawl of Plankton City to a more rural and scenic vistas surrounding Atrihia City. Rolling hills, dense forests, and sparkling lakes dotted the terrain, creating a picturesque view. Soon Atrihia City began to come into view and one could spot floating structures in different areas of the sky. EE looked out the window, his mind racing with thoughts of their mission. I think I might have the best way to make Dietrich spill more info. Eldris glanced at him. Besides suiting his ego, it's gonna be a more of a good cop bad cop kind of thing. You soothe his ego while he'll try to bring it down, which will cause him to want to mention more great things about the state of the Alliance, EE voiced with a thoughtful gaze. When did you start scheming like Gustav? He rubs off on all of us, doesn't he? The landscape shifted once more, revealing a bustling metropolis with a mix of historic and modern architecture. The city definitely had a lot of cultural heritage and vibrant art scene, making it a fitting location for a high-profile event like the Welcome Back Party. Eldris guided the aircraft towards landing the venue, a grand mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by manicured gardens and ornate fountains. As their spacecraft landed, they drew the attention of many who had gathered here. This was just the type of attention they wanted, so they won't be recognized as ordinary upon entering. Who is that? I don't know, but it has to be someone influential. Young Dietrich welcome party sure has attracted big shots. Some of the guests at the entrance whispered amongst themselves. EE adjusted his suit while preparing to get off the aircraft. Let's do this. Sure, Eldris nodded as they both got off their seat. As they approached the entrance, they could hear the lively chatter and music coming from inside. The party was in full swing, with guests mingling and enjoying the festivities. Inside the mansion, the opulence was on full display. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings, casting a warm glow over the elegant decor. Servers moved gracefully through the crowd, offering trays of exquisite hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Eldris and EE made their way through the crowd, greeting a few familiar faces along the way. They caught the attention of some guests who were outside on their time of arrival, and some began talking about them. We have some young MBO officers here today. I think I recognize them. Didn't they participate in ISOP? That EE has built himself quite the reputation in the MBO. EE and Eldris smiled at each other as their flamboyant arrival was bearing the fruits they wanted. They spotted Dietrich in the distance surrounded by a group of admirers, regaling them with tales of his time in the Alliance Corps. His handsome appearance hadn't changed, but he looked way more mature than years ago and a bit taller. He also happened to have a strong presence surrounding him, hinting at how far he had grown. They both decided to keep a little distance for a bit as they engaged in the party. Soon word about the arrival of two MBO officers who were youngsters just like Dietrich reached his ears. Dietrich was curious about this as a person whispered in his ears. He soon turned towards their directions. Time to put our plan into action, Eldris said, giving EE a reassuring nod. They immediately approached Dietrich, who looked up and smiled, recognizing them. Eldris, it's been a while. What brings you here? We heard you were back in town and couldn't resist the opportunity to catch up, Eldris replied, his tone friendly. Your father's party is fantastic. Dietrich's chest puffed up with pride. He does know how to throw a party, doesn't he? So, what have you two been up to? Eldris seized the moment. We've been keeping busy, but nothing as exciting as your adventures in the Alliance Corps. You've got to tell us more about it. I've heard it's incredibly challenging to get in. But surely not as challenging as the MBO. Right. EE added. Dietrich's eyes sparkled with excitement as he launched into a detailed account of his experiences, relishing the attention. Eldris and EE listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions that steered the conversation toward the information they needed. So, what's it like inside the Alliance? EE asked casually. I've heard it's a tightly guarded secret. Dietrich nodded, his expression serious. It is. The security is top-notch, and only the highest-ranking Corp members know the exact location. It's incredible, really, how they manage to keep it all under wraps. Eldris leaned in slightly. I can only imagine. It must be quite the logistical feat. Do they ever worry about breaches or unauthorized access? Dietrich laughed. Not with the systems they have in place. Plus, each officer's ship is equipped with security measures to prevent that. Only specific ships can access the location, and even then, only under strict protocols. Besides, who would want to breach the Alliance? The panel masters are always present and each of them are not too far from Jack's level of power. Eldris feigned awe. That's impressive. Makes me wonder how anyone could ever find it without authorization. Dietrich, enjoying the admiration, continued to elaborate on the measures, inadvertently revealing more about the protocols and security systems. Eldris and EE exchanged a subtle glance, knowing they were getting closer to the information they needed. Surely the panel masters cannot be compared to the MBO finest officers. EE perked his chin up with a tone of pride. Oh, they are better. They keep the place running when the MBO leader are not around. Since meetings do not hold all the time, the Alliance Council is not usually functional, but the MBO leaders visit every now and then for one situation or the other. Dietrich kept tooting away non-stop. EE and Eldris continued their conversation with Dietrich, carefully steering it towards topics that might reveal more useful information. The atmosphere in the party was lively, with guests mingling, music playing softly in the background, and the clinking of glasses adding to the ambience. So, EE, you also participated in ISOP, Dietrich said, a hint of jealousy creeping into his voice. EE smiled modestly. Yeah, it was quite an experience. The challenges were intense. Dietrich's expression soured slightly. Well, participating in ISOP isn't as important as being part of the Alliance Corps. You know, real-world missions, actual combat situations, not just some interstellar competition. Eldris interjected. True, but ISOP does well to give us the opportunity to raise our planet's banner. Being a part of the Alliance Corps means you don't specifically belong to a single planet. Dietrich scoffed. Rhea also participated in ISOP, yet has in Alliance custody now. Shows how much that competition is worth. EE and Eldris exchanged a quick glance, taking note of Dietrich's slip. EE feigned interest, probing further. Rhea's in Alliance custody? Where exactly? Dietrich, caught up in his moment of pride, nodded. Of course. Hes in cell block Delt 7. They keep all high-value prisoners there. EE and Eldris mentally filed away the information. This was a crucial piece of the puzzle. As the conversation drew to a close, Dietrich, eager to showcase his skills and gain more prestige, suggested a friendly spar. How about a sparring match? Just for old time's sake. It would be a great way to see how much we've all improved. Chapter 1496 Suicidal Mission. Chapter 1496 Suicidal Mission. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Eldris raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? We've had quite a bit of training since our cadet days. Dietrich smirked. I can handle it. Besides, it would be fun to see how we match up now. Eldris and EE continued to talk with Dietrich, sensing that their attempts to deter him from a spa were failing. "A spa isn't a good idea," Eldris said, trying to reason with him. "This is a party, after all." Dietrich waved his hand dismissively. "Come on, Eldris. It's just a friendly spa. Let's show everyone some real skills." He shot Eldris a concerned look, but Eldris nodded subtly, indicating that he had it under control. "All right, if you insist," Eldris agreed reluctantly. Dietrich instantly had it announced in the party that he would be having a spa with some old friends from the MBO. "A spa. This should be interesting. Let us see what someone from the Alliance Corps can do." Dietrich's father, Mr. Haddon, quickly arranged for a stage and a barrier to be set up in the backyard. The guests gathered around, curious and excited to see the spa. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Eldris and had been suppressing their bloodline energy the entire time, so no one really knew their true levels. Dietrich, confident and eager to show off, unleashed his first gate bloodline energy. The ground beneath him trembled, and a wave of power rippled through the air, causing the guests to murmur in awe. "Let's see what you've got," Dietrich said with a smirk, charging forward to attack. At that moment, Eldris stopped suppressing his bloodline energy. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The barriers surrounding the stage shattered into pieces, and the ground shook violently. Eldris' bloodline energy seeped forth, spreading across the surroundings like an unstoppable force. The pressure and intensity of his energy were undeniable, causing many guests to stagger and nearly collapse from the sheer oppressiveness of it. Dietrich's confident expression faltered for a brief moment, a look of horror flashing across his face as he realized the vast difference in their power levels. "Damn it. I thought my improvement rate was second to only that of Gustav. How did Eldris become this strong?" He quickly tried to mask his fear with a forced calmness, but it was clear that he was outmatched. This isn't necessary," Dietrich stammered, raising his hands. "I'm calling off the spa." The guests whispered among themselves, clearly impressed and somewhat frightened by the display of power. Dietrich stepped back, his face pale as he tried to regain his composure. Stepped forward, his expression serious. "Dietrich, it's important to know your limits. Eldris is a beta-ranked mixed blood. Challenging him wasn't a wise decision. It was just to catch up here." "Thank you for the lesson," Dietrich voiced with a bashful expression. The atmosphere gradually returned to normal as the guests dispersed, though the conversation continued to buzz about the incredible display of power they had just witnessed. And Eldris regrouped, sharing a knowing look. "That went better than expected," said with a small smile. "Indeed," Eldris replied. "But at least we got some information. We just need to make use of what we know." Nodded. "Well, go plan our next move once this party is over." On planet Aegon, Gustav stood in a secluded area, his body glowing with the radiant aura of the 3-in-1 golden form. His muscles rippled with power, and his skin shimmered like molten gold. "Time to see what God Eyes can do in this state," Gustav said internally as he activated God Eyes. There was no system notification as usual and Gustav didn't know what he was expecting, but it certainly wasn't what came next. His sight extended beyond the physical realm. In this heightened state, he unconsciously tapped into scenes that filled him with confusion and dread. The first vision showed Eldris, Falco, and Endrick engaged in a fierce battle in an unknown location in space. Blasts of energy and flashes of light illuminated their faces, twisted with determination and strain. Alien figures clashed with them, and the trio fought valiantly. The scene shifted abruptly to Rhea, restrained in a dark, cold cell. His body was battered, and his face contorted in pain as an unseen figure tortured him. The sound of his anguished cries echoed through the cell. The vision then morphed into another, even more disturbing scene. Jack, the strongest mixed blood, stood facing a formidable opponent. With a swift, brutal motion, Jack was sliced in two, his body falling apart in a grotesque spray of blood. Gustav's heart pounded in his chest as he watched himself appear in the vision, only to be stabbed in the chest by a powerful blade that created a black hole at the point of impact. This was something he had seen before. Gustav's eyes snapped open, and he staggered backward as the golden glow around him faded. He realized he had been in the golden body form for 29 minutes before it deactivated. However, the duration of his transformation was the least of his concerns. The visions he had seen were vivid and terrifying. Miss Amy's projection appeared before him. Miss Amy, Gustav began with a tone of uncertainty. I think I saw glimpses of the future. Eldris, Falco, and Endrik were fighting, and Rhea was being tortured along with a couple more unsettling things. Is it possible that these are true visions of the future? Miss Amy's eyes softened with understanding. It could be. The 3-in-1 golden body amplifies your abilities, including your perception of time. What you saw might very well be future events or branches in time which might occur on this timeline or outside of it. Gustav's heart raced. I need to contact them. Miss Amy's projection faded, and Gustav sprinted towards Stark's ship. His mind raced with thoughts of the visions, and his worry for his friends grew with each passing second. He reached Stark's ship and immediately tried to contact Endrik, Eldris, Falco, and Rhea. The transmission failed to connect, and frustration bubbled within him. Come on, Gustav muttered as his fingers flew over the controls. He tried again and again, but there was no response. Why aren't they answering? Stark approached, placing a reassuring hand on Gustav's shoulder. Gustav, calm down. Maybe try again later. Gustav clenched his fists. Stark, you don't understand. I saw them in trouble. I need to warn them to stop whatever they might be planning to do. Stark nodded with a serious expression. I understand your concern, but they might be in a situation where they can't respond right now. No, you do not understand. Gustav stated while the image of a particular person flashed in his mind. I can't lose anybody else. Stark let out a sigh upon hearing this. Despite how poker-faced Gustav tended to be, he actually bore a lot of emotional scars. If they are about to embark on something, doesn't that mean they haven't done so yet? Because if they are in the ship, they would have answered your transmission, Stark chipped in from a logical point of view. Gustav took a deep breath. You're right. I'll just wait and try again later. The next day, Gustav continued his training, pushing himself harder than ever before. He activated the 3-in-1 golden body form repeatedly, trying to extend the duration of its activation. He was only 1 minute away from reaching the goal, so now more than ever he wanted to achieve it. In the golden body state, Gustav felt the familiar surge of immense power coursing through his veins. The golden glow enveloped him, making him feel invincible. He closed his eyes, focusing on Earth, letting his perception travel across the vast expanse of space until the blue and green orb of his home planet filled his vision. As he descended with his astral form, he zeroed in on Plankton City. From his vantage point, he saw the bustling streets, the high-tech buildings, and the people going about their daily lives. Everything seemed normal. As he floated through the city, an unexpected sight caught his attention: Falco. He was casually walking down a street, heading towards an apartment building. When did Falco return to Earth? Gustav followed him with his curiosity piqued. Falco entered the building, and Gustav, in his astral form, phased through the walls. He followed Falco to an apartment and was surprised to see Eldris, Endrik, and EE inside, preparing for something. The room was filled with various equipment, and a tense atmosphere hung in the air. Rhea was noticeably absent, and as Gustav listened to their conversation, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. It is finally time for us to get Rhea back from the Intergalactic Alliance, Eldris stated. EE nodded. We've been over how the infiltration will go. Everyone just needs to stick to their roles. Gustav's mind raced. The future visions he had seen suddenly made sense. The battle, the danger, it was all connected to this mission. He couldn't let them go through with it. Chapter 1497 Jack vs Angie. Chapter 1497 Jack vs Angie. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Pulling himself out of the golden body state, Gustav found himself back on Aegon, panting from the exertion. He realized he had been in the state for over 30 minutes. It was a new record. Before he could gather his thoughts, Miss Amy's projection appeared before him. Congratulations, Gustav, she said with a proud smile. You've reached the goal. It's time for you to use the warp demolator. Not yet, Gustav replied urgently. My friends are in trouble. I gotta go. Miss Amy's expression turned serious. I understand. But remember, you have a limited time. I know, Gustav said while turning around to leave. I'm headed to Earth. I'll use the warp demolator once I get back. Miss Amy nodded. Very well. Be careful, kiddo. Gustav nodded with an expression of determination before heading to pack up some essentials. Stark wanted to come along, but Gustav shook his head. I need to conserve as much energy in my dimensional bracelet as possible. I'll be going alone. Stark frowned but nodded in understanding. Be careful. Gustav didn't waste any time. He input Earth's coordinates into the dimensional bracelet, and it began counting down. 2. 1. With a flash of blue light, Gustav vanished from sight. Gustav reappeared atop a mountainous region in Plankton City. The cool wind ruffled his hair as he looked around, taking in the familiar landscape. Without hesitation, he shapeshifted into a different look, a tall man with short brown hair and a plain face. He had also learnt to also suppress his bloodline energy because with the aura he originally gave off, the entire city would feel that an alpha-ranked mixed blood was around. Satisfied that he wouldn't draw attention, he leapt into the air. Flight has been activated. He sped across the sky as a blur against the horizon. In an instant, he arrived atop ES apartment building. Bam! He immediately manipulated his body atoms, turning into milky light particles as he phased through the roof and down a few floors, arriving directly inside ES apartment. The place was eerily silent. Gustav's eyes darted around the room, taking in the familiar surroundings. They already left. Realizing the apartment was empty, Gustav decided to properly spread his perception. He closed his eyes to focus on their specific features, feeling the energy signatures around him. He could sense multiple spacecraft leaving Earth's orbit, but his perception soon wrapped around a particular one. They're almost gone completely, Gustav muttered to himself while his brows knitted in frustration. He prepared to intercept Endrick, Eldris, Falco, and EE, who were flying away from Earth in his spacecraft, unaware of his presence. Just as he was about to leave, a sudden chaotic energy surged through his perception. He turned his attention to a particular icy region of Earth. This energy feels familiar, Gustav muttered while his eyes slowly widened. As Gustav sensed the familiar energy emanating from the icy region, his perception zeroed in on that direction. The scene that unfolded before his mind's eye was both shocking and urgent. This was the exact place where the Death Angel was being held and where Jack was stationed as a guard. Gustav's eyes widened in shock as he sensed a familiar yet altered presence that had just materialized like a glitch in reality. Her body was half white and half black, her eyes reflected a terrifying duality, and an inverted horn jutted from her forehead. The figure that appeared was unmistakably Angie in her altered form. With his perception providing feedback like a video recorder, Gustav could see that Jack had already confronted her. The sense of urgency spurred him into action. He couldn't afford to waste a single moment. Without hesitation, Gustav activated his powers and shot towards the icy region at breakneck speed. Lightning Blitz has been activated, the landscape blurred around him as he crossed a terrifying distance, scaling multiple cities in one fell swoop. Despite his speed, the battle between Angie and Jack had already commenced before his arrival. Jack's dark hair flowed in the icy wind, and his eyes were locked onto Angie, who hovered above the frozen ground, her dual-colored form exuding a menacing presence. Both their energies clashed despite having not met each other with blows physically. The surroundings were croaking in pressure and landscapes sinking due to this. "Who are you?" Jack demanded as his voice echoed through the desolate landscape. Angie did not respond. Her eyes were cold and devoid of emotion. In her hand, a dark blade materialized, its edge shimmering with a dangerous energy that seemed to slice through time, space, and reality itself. That blade. Very powerful. I should avoid head contact, Jack said internally as star-shaped patterns began to appear around him. H without another word, the two clashed. Bang! Angie's speed was incredible. Her movements were comparable to line-like blurs as she darted around Jack, delivering swift and powerful strikes. Jack, however, was no ordinary opponent, as she must have been aware of. He parried her attacks with ease, palm striking her wrist to prevent the slashes at close range before countering with devastating blows of his own. Bang! 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 The devastating blows were unable to connect as Angie's speed matched that of his, colliding with his palms and fists before they could hit her. Such collisions were causing sounds akin to explosions as the surroundings suffered the consequences from their relentless clashes. However, despite Angie's strength in this state, Jack no doubt had more experience and made use of it. He bound Angie's empty hand with his space construct, rendering it momentarily immobile as he evaded a slash and sent a fist towards her frozen side. Bang! Angie was sending flying across the air, but Jack didn't let her get too far before he performed another action. 8 star-shaped patterns appeared around Angie's figure, instantly boxing her in. Her entire frame was soon struggling to fit into the box of this space as it began to compress. "This feels awfully familiar," Jack mumbled. "Oh yes. We've done this before, but not in this timeline, right?" he added with a look of understanding. Within the box, Angie's face displayed an expression of struggle as the materialized blade fell out of her grasp and her body contorted while the space continuously shrunk. "Well, I hate to break it to you, but regardless of the timeline, I already gained experience from our previous battle, so don't blame me for using that to my advantage. This time I will properly discard of you," Jack stated with a tone of assurance. Gustav arrived at this moment on scene with a disoriented expression. He wanted to move in but instantly stopped himself. "What do I do? Do I help her? But my vision. If I interfere right now, will it spell the end for Jack?" Gustav found himself lost on what action to take. "Don't interfere. Just look away if you can't handle it," the system's voice chipped in. The sight of Angie getting boxed in to the point where her bones began to creak and twist truly wasn't something Gustav could bear to see. "How can you ask me to look away? I can't let it end this way." Gustav wanted to interfere at this moment, but the system spoke again. "You are one that likes to use logic over emotions, right? Do you think Angie will be able to kill anyone, or you for that matter, if Jack takes care of her now? So you expect me to just sit back and do nothing? For the sake of everyone, Jack and yourself, yes." Gustav squeezed his fist so tight in frustration that blood began to drip from his hand. Angie figure mangled even more as the box grew smaller, and at this point, there was not even a single bit of space within Jack's construct. Gustav turned to watch as his heart pounded in his chest. He recounted all the memories shared with Angie from the day they met to how she began to grow on him. He recalled their last encounter before she was taken while watching blood seep from his skin. His heart ached. He had never felt this way before. "I can't do it," Gustav voiced before vanishing. Fwish he reappeared before Jack and held his outstretched hand. "You don't have to kill her," Gustav stated as his fist clumped tightly onto Jack's arm. "Huh? Who are you?" Jack questioned with a look of astonishment. "It doesn't matter. Why not just capture her instead of killing her? She doesn't necessarily need to die, right?" Gustav tried to reason with Jack, causing him to momentarily pause his actions. "What do you mean by she? That thing is an abomination that I will not allow exist on this earth for even a second longer if I could help it. I am not risking the safety of this planet on the hope that this thing will stay captured. It is even more powerful than I remember." Jack waved Gustav off with a gentle yet firm shove. Chapter 1498 Three-Way Battle. Chapter 1498 Three-Way Battle. Author's note. Unedited chapter. I am not risking the safety of Earth on the hope that this thing will stay captured. It is even more powerful than I remember. Jack waved Gustav off with a gentle yet firm shove. "I can't let you kill her," Gustav stated with a strong tone. "Kid, if you know what is good for you, leave now." Jack already had enough of Gustav's interference. "I will consider you an enemy if you disrupt one more time," he added with a stern look. "I can't do that." Gustav's eyes twinkled with a crimson glow as he slowly began to unleash his energy. Jack was immediately taken aback as he felt the steaming presence ripple through the surroundings. I see. You're no ordinary person, are you? Jack felt it made sense since Gustav had appeared before him so suddenly and was even flying. I don't want her dead. Fauhumsha tilde heavy winds began spreading about the surroundings as both their energies clashed just like that of Jack and Angius at the time. Jack discovered that this unknown person was a mixed blood and they were not in any way weak. His eyes squinted as he twirls his fingers, prepared to use a very powerful ability. Even though the space seal construct only lasts for 2 seconds. Not a single life form on Earth will be capable of movement. I will use that brief time to end both their lives, Jack decided internally. Careful. He is going for the kill, it will be fine. I am not so helpless that a single attack will be able to end my life even though he is the strongest mixed blood, Gustav responded internally as he prepared to use a powerful ability as well. About that. The system seemed like it was going to inform him about something when an unexpected situation suddenly occurred. Angie, whose figure was a mangled mess within the space construct Jack created, suddenly glared at Gustav's direction and then back at Jack. Her eyes turned bloodshot as she exploded forth with a wave of dark energy. Boom! Both Jack and Gustav were shocked as the wave swept across hundreds of miles, causing great destruction. Jack had surrounded himself and a few other structures around in his constructs to avoid accidents, but while Gustav seemed to have been consumed by the destruction. Jack couldn't confirm since he suddenly had his plate full again. He didn't even have the time to lament as Angie came at him with unbridled ferocity. Boom! Boom! Sounds akin to thunderclaps rang out as they clashed repeatedly. As the visibility of a particular area returned to normal, Gustav's figure could be spotted unscathed from the previous encounter. Gustav watched from a distance with a look of skepticism. As Angie and Jack exchanged blows, the ground beneath them shattered, sending shockwaves across the icy region. Angius' inverted horn emitted beams of dark energy that Jack narrowly dodged, while Jack's fists glowed with a radiant light that seemed to pierce through the darkness. I should have ended this when I had the chance, Jack growled in frustration. Angie remained silent with an unchanging expression. Another blade materialized in her hand at this moment, causing the surroundings to twist and turn. It seemed even more powerful than the previous one. Angie proceeded to swing her dark blade, and a rift opened in the air, tearing through the very fabric of reality. Jack narrowly avoided the attack as the rift closed behind him with a violent snap. Gustav knew he couldn't wait any longer. Summoning all his strength, he propelled himself forward, his form blurring as he moved at lightning speed. He appeared between Angie and Jack with his arms outstretched to block their attacks. Stop! Gustav shouted, his voice echoing through the frozen landscape. Both Angie and Jack paused, their eyes widening in surprise at the sudden appearance of Gustav. For a brief moment, there was silence as the three of them stood in a tense standoff. He managed to stop my hand. Who is this kid? Jack wondered internally. Angie, on the other hand. One couldn't tell what she was thinking or if she was even thinking at all. Angie, it's me, Gustav said, his voice softening. You can stop this now. It doesn't have to get any worse. Jack's eyes narrowed as he looked at Gustav. How do you know her? You are clearly a mixed blood, he asked with a cautious tone. She's my friend. But something has happened to her. She needs help. Still wanting to hide his identity, Gustav could only say this much. Angie's expression hardened. She remained silent, but her grip on the dark blade tightened. Angie, please. Don't give him more reasons to end you. Whatever this is. We can fix it, Gustav pleaded, his voice filled with desperation. For a moment, it seemed like Angie hesitated as her eyes flickered with uncertainty. But then her expression hardened again, and she lashed out with a powerful strike aimed at Gustav. Gustav barely managed to dodge as his eyes widened in shock. Angie, no. Jack took advantage of the momentary distraction and charged at Angie as his fists glowed with radiant energy. She is a threat. I need to neutralize her, he said, his voice cold and determined. No. Gustav shouted and moved to intercept Jack. The three of them clashed, their powers creating a blinding display of light and darkness. Gustav found himself torn between trying to protect Angie and stopping Jack from harming her while also trying to stop her as well. While in their midst, both Angie and Jack lunged at him simultaneously. Their combined assault was overwhelming, and despite using multiple abilities to defend himself, Gustav found himself struggling to keep up. His eyes darted like an arrow, following but barely deflecting their attacks that were continuously being sent out at a speed that a beta-ranked mixed blood would be unable to handle. Gustav's perception followed through as two powerful fists drove forward from both sides. He had no choice but to parry both attacks as his body got covered completely in iron silk upon collision. Ugh! Gustav grunted as he was sent flying across the entire region, crashing through buildings and leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The force of the impact rattled his bones as blood trailed from the side of his lips, but he quickly recovered. Meanwhile, Angie and Jack had focused on battling each other again since Gustav was momentarily out of the picture. Jack used his construct abilities to teleport massive asteroids from space, hurling them at Angie with deadly precision. Angie, with her incredible speed and agility, effortlessly deflected the asteroids with her dark blade, slicing through them as if they were made of paper. The ground trembled with each collision, and the sky lit up with bursts of energy as their attacks clashed. Gustav watched from a distance, his mind racing. He knew he had to do something to stop this madness, but he was hesitant to use the one ability that could undoubtedly put a pause to the ongoing situation. Cosmic superiority. Unfortunately, Gustav knew that using cosmic superiority would mean revealing his true identity. Jack and the rest of the world would no doubt identify him since there was only a single Earthling who had achieved cosmic superiority. Gustav clenched his fists as his eyes narrowed with resolve. "I have no choice," he muttered to himself. Connecting to the base of his core, Gustav activated his cosmic superiority. A glowing cross appeared in his pupils as red-pinkish energy spread from him, cascading across the world. The sheer force of his power caused all living things to pause their actions and drop to their knees in reverence. Jack felt the overwhelming pressure and tried to fight against it. "Is this?" he gasped, struggling to stay in the air as his body trembled. His mind clicked as he recalled the only person on Earth capable of such power. "Gustav, it has to be you," Jack realized, gritting his teeth. Gustav didn't say a word in response. Instead he stared at Jack with an apologetic expression. Despite his best efforts, Jack eventually succumbed to the power and fell to his knees. The realization that Gustav was behind this filled him with an indescribable tension. However, Gustav's plan hit a major snag. Angie was completely unaffected by the power of cosmic superiority. She moved with an unchanging expression. "How are you able to move?" Gustav's eyes widened in disbelief. Although Gustav knew his cosmic superiority had been resisted by beings far above his level of strength, this was years back. He was way more stronger now and even Jack was unable to withstand it. So how? How was Angie unaffected? Gustav couldn't wrap his head around this. Angie didn't respond. Instead, she raised her dark blade and lunged at Gustav with blinding speed. Gustav barely had time to react, his cosmic energy flaring as he deflected the attack with a powerful cross-shaped barrier. "Angie, stop!" Gustav shouted as his voice echoed through the chaos. Chapter 1499 Cosmic Separation. Chapter 1499 Cosmic Separation. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The clash between Angie's blade and Gustav's barrier created a shockwave that rippled through the surrounding area, sending Jack flying since he was currently unable to defend himself. Gustav could feel the strain of maintaining the barrier against Angie's relentless power. Could it be? Gustav's mind raced with theories. Angie's existence has been altered and Yaki is only effective against beings from this plane. Gustav felt a strong urge to completely incinerate Falco's father at this moment. His chest glowed up at this moment as a golden beam gathered and shot at Angie. Thum tilde it burst forth with unfathomable power, ramming straight into Angie and sending her hurling across the air. "If I have to beat sense into you to bring back Angie, I will," Gustav stated while springing forward with extreme speed. He caught Angie's horn in midair and spun her around before flinging her in a particular direction. Angie flipped continuously across the air and slammed into a mountain, causing it to blast apart while her figure kept trailing forward without slowing. Gustav's figure turned into a streak that followed her closely while arching his arm backwards to deliver another powerful strike. Gustav's muscles rippled with newfound strength as he battled Angie across the world. Every punch he landed sent shockwaves through the ground, causing tremors that echoed for miles. Angie fought back with equal ferocity. Her half-black and half-white form was a blur of motion as she countered his attacks with her dark blade. "You need to snap out of it, Angie," Gustav roared, ramming her into a mountain. The peak crumbled under the force of their collision, sending rocks and debris cascading down the slopes. Angie writhed and twisted, her eyes burning with a crazed intensity. Her half-black and half-white form radiated an eerie power, and her inverted horn gleamed ominously. She lashed out with her dark blade, aiming to slice through Gustav's defenses. He caught her wrist mid-swing, twisting it with a force that made her drop the weapon. "I will show you what it is to be a cosmic superior being," Gustav declared, thrusting 2 fingers toward Angie's chest. His fingers crackled with energy as a reddish and golden cross formed at their tips. The cross phased through Angie's body, expanding rapidly. Angie's eyes widened in shock as the cross pulled her entire being towards it, binding her in place. "Cosmic separation," Gustav shouted, his voice echoing with a powerful resonance. Angie screamed in agony as the cross began to split her apart. One half of her was pure white, the other pitch black. Her body convulsed violently, the process tearing her in two. The splitting caused her to cry out, her voice filled with pain and confusion. "Aua!" Angie's voice, a blend of desperation and torment, reverberated in the air. But Gustav was relentless. He pushed harder, focusing all his willpower on completing the separation. Beads of sweat formed on his brow as he poured more energy into the cross, determined to free her from the corruption that had taken hold. Angie's body continued to split, the division nearly complete. Her screams intensified, echoing across the desolate landscape. Just as Gustav was about to succeed, another horn burst from the other side of Angie's skull. Her power surged, and with a primal scream, she broke free from the cosmic bind. Her eyes flared with an even greater intensity, and her form glowed with an unearthly light. She lunged at Gustav with newfound strength, her strikes faster and more powerful than before. Gustav tried to counter, but she was too quick. Her blade slashed through his defenses, sending him flying through the air as a giant gash appeared on his belly. "Fuck, if I hadn't been any slower, I would have been split in two," Gustav's eyes narrowed in disbelief. "You can't keep this up forever," Gustav said through gritted teeth, wiping blood from his mouth. "I won't let you." His belly merged together as he charged at her with blinding speed while his fists glowed with cosmic energy. Angie met his assault head-on, their clash sending sparks flying in all directions. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered, unable to withstand the force of their battle. Angie unleashed a barrage of strikes, each one faster and more precise than the last. Gustav deflected most of them, but a few landed, leaving deep cuts on his skin. He retaliated with a powerful uppercut, sending her skyward. He leaped after her, meeting her mid-air with a series of crushing blows. Gustav's attacks didn't necessarily do much damage, but each of Angie's attacks were completely devastating. Their forms barely visible as they moved at incredible speeds. The ground beneath them was torn asunder, the air crackling with energy. "Remember who you are, Angie," Gustav voiced with a strong tone. "Remember us. Remember everything we fought for." For a brief moment, Angie's eyes softened, the darkness within her receding. But then, her resolve hardened, and she attacked with even more ferocity. She landed a powerful kick to Gustav's chest, sending him crashing through several buildings. He emerged from the rubble, blooded but undeterred. He charged at her with renewed determination while Angie met his assault head-on. "Angie, stop this madness," Gustav yelled, his voice echoing through the ruins. However, Angie didn't spare him in the slightest as they collided once more. Their clash shook the earth, their blows causing shockwaves that leveled structures and uprooted trees. Angius' blade met Gustav's fists in a flurry of sparks and energy. Despite the pain, Gustav's determination burned brighter than ever. "You were stronger than this," he said, blocking a strike that would have cleaved him in two. "I know you're still in there." With a burst of energy, Gustav activated his cosmic separation, hoping to subdue her. The glowing cross in his eyes intensified, casting a radiant light that bathed the battlefield. Angie faltered for a moment, but her new horn seemed to shield her from the full effect. "Die!" she growled as her blade cut through the air with deadly precision. Gustav managed to evade at the last second, but the dark residual energy sent him flying. Gustav gritted his teeth, trying to keep up with Angius' relentless assault. His muscles ached from the constant exertion, and every blow he landed felt like it took more out of him than it did her. She was a whirlwind of destruction, her inverted horn gleaming with malevolent energy as she attacked with relentless ferocity. Angius' expression remained blank, her eyes devoid of recognition as she pressed the attack. If it wasn't for regeneration, Gustav would have long been a goner. Meanwhile, Jack was struggling against the overwhelming power of Gustav's cosmic superiority. The oppressive energy had since brought him to his knees despite bearing the title of World's Strongest, but he wasn't one to be defeated easily. Channeling his bloodline abilities, Jack formed a space construct around himself, causing his being to vibrate at a different frequency from the current plane. The world around him shimmered as he phased partially out of existence. In this state, Jack was both on Earth and not, allowing him to bypass the effects of Gustav's cosmic superiority. Once free, he prepared to launch an attack. Gustav, caught up in his battle with Angie, sensed the shift in energy but couldn't fully grasp what was happening. His eyes widened as Angie suddenly vanished from his sight. "Where did she go?" Gustav muttered, his eyes scanning the area frantically. Before he could react, Angie reappeared behind Jack with a speed that even Gustav's eyes struggled to follow. The dark energy she emitted turned the sky to night, her blade materializing in her grasp once more. "No!" Gustav shouted as his frame shot through the darkened landscape, but his speed seemed to have reduced drastically. In a blur of motion, Angie sliced diagonally with her blade while Jack rushed backwards with light speed. The air was filled with the sickening sound of flesh and bone being severed. Jack's eyes widened in shock as his body divided into two halves that fell to the ground, blood jetting out like a crimson fountain. "I evaded. How did she?" These were Jack's last words as he stared at the other half of himself getting swallowed up by darkness. "Angie, stop!" Gustav cried while rushing towards her, but he was too late. The deed was done. Jack, the strongest mixed blood, lay in disintegrating pieces on the ground. "What did you just do?" Gustav lost all composure as he screamed out, but a fuse was instantly lit in his mind. His heart pounded in his chest as he recalled the vision of the future. It was happening right before his eyes. Does this mean? Gustav immediately leapt backwards, distancing himself from Angie. "I need to go," he tried tapping on his dimensional bracelet, but Angie suddenly appeared before him with her blade thrusting forward. "Watch out!" The system screamed in his head as the blade rippled through the air, aiming at his chest. Chapter 1500 Second Death. Chapter 1500 Second Death. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav's heart pounded with desperation as Angie blade approached at a speed quicker than he could activate his dimensional bracelet. Lightning Blitz has been activated. As he triggered the lightning blitz, his form dissolved into a streak of lightning, racing away from her. He reappeared over 1,000 miles away in an instant, basking in the change of scenery. Before he could even process his next move, a sharp pain erupted in his chest. Angius' blade, dark and malevolent, had followed him through space and time, stabbing deep into his heart. His eyes widened in disbelief as he looked down at the blade protruding from his chest. Dark, corrosive energy spread rapidly from the point of infiltration, coursing through his veins and seeping into his very being. "No! Angie!" he whispered, feeling the life force draining from him. He dropped to the ground with his body convulsing as the dark energy continued to spread, snuffing out the light within him. Angie stood a short distance away, her blade still connected to him through a thin, almost imperceptible thread of darkness. Her eyes were blank, devoid of the warmth and life that had once defined her. In the depths of her mind, a voice whispered, "Good human. You have destroyed the outworldly." Suddenly, Angie's eyes flickered with recognition. The haze clouding her mind began to lift, and she stared in horror at Gustav's lifeless form. Tears welled up in her eyes, streaming down her cheeks as she fell to her knees beside him. "Gustav!" Her voice broke with emotion. The voice in her head persisted, cold and unyielding. "Now, kill yourself as well." Angie clutched her head. "What have I done?" "Kill yourself." She raised the blade towards her neck in the next instant. Meanwhile, in the void of darkness that was now Gustav's consciousness, he floated aimlessly. The system's voice echoed around him. "You have died, Gustav. The darkness from the blade is interfering with your regeneration and reincarnation abilities. Does that mean I can't come back to life?" Gustav questioned. "If your reincarnation bloodline doesn't kick in, you won't." No, this can't be the end. There must be something that can be done." The system responded, its tone almost apologetic. "I do not know of any solution. The dark energy is too powerful." Images from the system's feedback flashed before Gustav, showing Angie kneeling by his corpse, her form racked with sobs. She held the blade to her neck, her resolve faltering as the voice urged her to end her life. "No, Angie, don't." Gustav shouted into the void, but his voice reached no ears. He thought of Falco, Endrik, and Ealdris, who were on their way to the Alliance. He thought of all the battles they had fought together, the sacrifices they had made. This couldn't be the end. It couldn't. Angie's tearful eyes met the blade as she prepared to decapitate herself. "I'm sorry, Gustav. I'm so sorry." Desperation clawed at Gustav's soul. There has to be a way, he thought, his mind frantically searching for any glimmer of hope. In the midst of his despair, a golden light began to glow in the void. It started as a faint flicker but grew brighter with each passing moment. Gustav reached out, his fingers brushing against the light. To his surprise, it felt warm and familiar. "The ancient hourglass," the system's voice noted with a hint of surprise. The hourglass appeared above Gustav's corpse, its sands shimmering with an ethereal glow. As it turned upside down, the golden sand within began to flow in reverse. Time itself started to rewind. Gustav felt a pull as his consciousness was drawn back to the light. The dark energy receded and the wound in his chest closing as if it had never been there. The blade poised at Angie's neck suddenly froze. Her eyes widened as she watched the events around her unfold in reverse. The golden light enveloped both Gustav and Angie, reversing the damage done by their brutal fight. The buildings they had destroyed reformed, the earth healed, and the very fabric of reality stitched itself back together. The pain and agony that had consumed them both dissipated. Gustav found himself suspended in the vast, timeless void as the universe rewound. Watching events unfold in reverse, he saw Jack's body reassemble, Angie's deadly blade retreat from his heart, and everything gradually resetting. His consciousness floated above it all, detached from the temporal currents. He devised a plan to trap and isolate Angie, ensuring her dark influence would no longer pose a threat. When the universe's timeline reached the point of Angie's initial appearance, Gustav seized the ancient hourglass, stopping the reversal. Time halted, and he re-entered his body. Gustav bolted toward the icy region where Jack and Angie were about to clash. Arriving just in time, he stood between them. Jack, sensing the shift in time and retaining his memories from the other timeline, immediately lunged to strike Angie down. Gustav intercepted him, shouting, "Stop, Jack. There's another way." Jack's expression twisted in confusion and anger. "Gustav, you can't protect her. She's too dangerous." Ignoring Jack's protests, Gustav turned to Angie and embraced her tightly. "I will end your torment," he whispered. Activating assimilation, he began to absorb her body into his own. Angie struggled as the process began. Her black and white form twisted and writhed, trying to escape the pull. "Krua," she screamed in a tone filled with both rage and agony. The assimilation was excruciating, each second stretching into an eternity. Gustav felt every ounce of her pain, the darkness within her fighting against him. The air around them shimmered with energy, the ground beneath them cracking and heaving under the immense pressure. Jack watched while clenching his fists in frustration. He wanted to intervene, but something in Gustav's resolve held him back. Gustav, if this goes wrong, I will have no other choice but to end you alongside with her. Gustav gritted his teeth, his voice strained. You won't have to. The process continued for nearly an hour, the struggle evident on both their faces. Slowly, Angie's dark form began to meld with Gustav's, her features blending into his own. His skin took on a pale hue, and dark tendrils of energy swirled around him. Finally, with a final, agonizing surge of power, Gustav completed the assimilation. His body now bore a mixture of his and Angie's features, a stark contrast of light and dark. He gasped for breath, feeling the surging darkness within him. Without hesitation, Gustav plunged his hand into his chest, gritting his teeth against the searing pain. His fingers wrapped around something solid, and with a fierce tug, he pulled out an entirely human Angie. She emerged from his body, collapsing to the ground, unconscious but free from the dark influence that had consumed her. Gustav, now bearing the full brunt of the darkness, fought to contain it. The black energy roiled within him, threatening to overwhelm his senses. His vision blurred, and he felt himself slipping into unconsciousness. Kill. Destroy. Kill. Destroy. Retrieve the Dark Angel. Cause catastrophe. Kill the strongest. His mind raced with all sorts of thoughts that sought to consume him. Jack rushed forward, catching Gustav before he hit the ground. Gustav. Stay with me, he shouted. Gustav's eyes fluttered open for a moment, his voice barely a whisper. Jack. Take care of her. She's free now. I have to put myself to sleep. Or the voices will overwhelm me. Help them. With that, Gustav's body went limp, the darkness still churning within him. Jack carefully laid him down beside Angie, both of them unconscious but alive. As the wind howled around them, Jack took a deep breath. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. This kid, you truly are something else, he muttered. But what did he mean by help them? Jack wondered internally. Inside Gustav's spacecraft, Eildris, Falco, and Endrik were gathered around the central control panel. The ship AIS voice echoed through the cabin, informing them that their journey would take approximately 3 days, after passing through designated wormholes. 3 days, EE said, tapping the console thoughtfully. That gives us enough time to review our plans and ensure we're ready for anything. Eildris nodded, his eyes shimmering with determination. We've gone over it countless times, but we need to be absolutely certain. There's no room for error. Falco leaned back in his seat as dark energy swirled subtly around his fingers. I just hope there won't be any mishaps. Rhea is counting on us. Endrik, sitting slightly apart from the others, felt a gnawing unease that he couldn't shake. He didn't want to alarm the group, so he kept his concerns to himself. As the conversation continued around him, he excused himself quietly and made his way to one of the private spaces in the ship. The room was dimly lit, providing a quiet retreat from the bustling activity outside. Endrik took a deep breath and communicated with Husarius. A glowing green dot appeared on his forehead, pulsating gently. Husarius, Endrik called softly, his voice echoing in the small chamber. I need your guidance. The familiar, calming presence of Husarius filled his mind. Endrik, what troubles you? There's something off, Endrik admitted. Chapter 1501 Substation Intermission. Chapter 1501 Substation Intermission. Author's note. Unedited chapter. I can't put my finger on it, but I have this overwhelming sense that something is going wrong. I was hoping you could help me see into the fates. Husarius responded with a tone that was both kind and stern. Endrik, you know that seeing into the fates continuously is a misuse of your time candidate abilities. Also, have you forgotten that the fabric of time is delicate and should not be manipulated lightly? We have seen the consequences of doing so in the past. You exist for the purpose of balance. I understand that, Endrik said, frustration creeping into his voice. But we're walking into the heart of the Alliance. If something goes wrong, it could mean the end for us and for Rhea. Husarius was silent for a moment, weighing the situation. Despite the situation, there could be diverse consequences if we alter the fates once more. It should only be glimpsed upon in relation to situations with the outworldly. Unless you wish to put your brother in danger again, I don't advise it. Endrik had a thoughtful look upon hearing that. Gustav's safety was extremely important to him, but he also couldn't imagine how Gustav would react if they all wind up getting into big trouble here. Okay. But can you tell me one thing? Endrik voiced with a low tone. What is it? Husarius inquired. Can you at least tell me that we are not currently on a turbulent path? Endrik asked. Every path through time is a turbulent part. There is no smooth sailing at any junction, especially when we are getting closer to it every day, Husarius responded cryptically. That isn't what I mean. How does our current path end in correlation with the goal of retrieving our friend? Good or bad? Endrik decided to be a bit more specific this time. That is. The green dot on Endrik's forehead glowed brighter and Endrik felt his consciousness expand. A single image of Rhea embracing all four of them appeared in his mind briefly. Husarius didn't say a single word and only showed that. Endrik nodded in understanding. Thank you. Don't thank me. I only showed you a single glimpse. Arriving at that junction is one that won't come easy, but when the time comes, you will know what step to take, Husarius responded. Endrik nodded again as he exited the private space and rejoined the others, who were still engrossed in their plans. Glanced up as Endrik approached. Everything okay? Yeah, Endrik replied, forcing a smile. Just needed a moment to clear my head. They continued discussing their strategy, refining every detail to ensure their success. The spacecraft thrummed steadily as it propelled them through the vast expanse of space. What if the Alliance catches on? They'll likely try to trap us, Eldris replied, his eyes focused on a holographic display. Which is why we need to be ready for anything. We stick to the plan, said firmly. We get in, find Rhea, and get out before they can react. They spent the next few hours going over their plans again, each detail scrutinized to ensure there were no gaps. As the first wormhole approached, the AIS voice echoed through the cabin. Prepare for entry into wormhole in T-1 minute. The group secured themselves in their seats as the wormhole loomed ahead. It was a swirling vortex of cosmic energy. The ship shuddered as it was drawn into the vortex, the stars outside blurring into streaks of light. The journey through the wormhole was brief, and they emerged on the other side, the stars returning to their normal, twinkling selves. The AI announced their successful transition, and they continued on their course. As their journey continued, Endrik, Eldris, Falco, and prepared themselves for the next phase of their mission. They were about to arrive at an Alliance substation, a critical stopover on their way to the main Alliance base. This substation was essential for restocking resources and acquiring disguises for their infiltration. The substation was a large, imposing structure that floated in the depths of space. It was surrounded by smaller defense satellites and patrol ships, all part of the Alliance's formidable security network. The substation itself was a behemoth, with docking bays for numerous spacecraft and a vast array of support facilities. Usually, any planetary species underneath the umbrella of the Alliance were allowed access. It wasn't exactly where the Alliance leaders met, so this location was pretty much public. As they approached, the ship's AI announced, entering Docking Bay 3. Please prepare for disembarkation. Endrik, Eldris, Falco, and donned their MBO officer disguises, making sure everything was in place. They were all originally MBO officers, so it wasn't difficult to adopt the mannerisms to avoid suspicion. The docking bay was a bustling hub of activity. Alliance Corps members in their blue uniforms, each adorned with the emblem of a hand holding the universe, moved about, tending to various tasks. The emblem gleamed under the bright lights. Eldris and Falco took the lead, walking confidently toward a group of Alliance officers. One of them, a tall, muscular alien with greenish skin and multiple limbs, noticed them approaching. Greetings, Eldris said, flashing a friendly smile. We're MBO officers on a mission and need to restock some resources. Mind pointing us in the right direction? The green-skinned officer, whose star-shaped patterns across his body shimmered faintly, looked them over. Sure thing. You can head to Storage Bay 5. We have everything you might need. Much appreciated, Falco added, engaging the officer in a casual conversation. Been a busy day here, huh? The officer chuckled, his multiple limbs gesturing animatedly. You bet. Always something going on. By the way, Imquorn. You folks from Earth? Yep, that's right, Eldris responded, maintaining a friendly demeanor. Caldris, and this is Balco. Busy times back home too. As they chatted, EE discreetly slipped away, using his vortex to get into one of the private storage points. The room was dimly lit and filled with various supplies. He quickly located a rack of Alliance Corps uniforms and a small transmission tool, exactly what they needed for the next part of their mission. Back in the docking bay, Eldris and Falco continued their conversation with Quorn and another officer, a slender figure with silvery skin and luminous blue eyes named Vyra. So, what's it like working at a substation? Falco asked, genuinely curious. Vyra smiled. It's a mix of routine and surprises. You get to meet interesting folks like yourselves, but we also deal with the occasional skirmish or emergency. Keeps things lively. Sounds like a good balance, Eldris said, nodding. Well, we should get our supplies and be on our way. Thanks for the help, Quorn, Vyra. Anytime, Quorn replied, waving a limb in farewell. Safe travels. EE reappeared near the entrance, giving a subtle nod to indicate he had what they needed. They made their way to Storage Bay 5, collected the necessary resources, and headed back to their ship without arousing any suspicion. Once they were back on board and safely away from the substation, they breathed a collective sigh of relief. That went smoothly, EE said, holding up the uniforms and the transmission tool. We should be able to blend in better now. Good job, everyone, Endrick said, steering the ship back on course. We have what we need to proceed. Let's keep going. As they continued their journey, the ship vibrated steadily, a comforting sound in the otherwise silent expanse of space. The stolen uniforms and transmission tool were securely stored, ready for the next phase of their plan. Falco leaned back in his seat, looking thoughtful. You know, that Quorn guy seemed pretty decent. Makes you wonder how many of them are just following orders. Probably most of them, EE agreed. It's easy to forget that there's a lot of regular folks caught up in all this. Eldris nodded. That's true. But we have a mission, and we can't lose sight of that. Endrick, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke up. I have a feeling things are going to get more intense from here on out. Let's stay focused and be ready for anything. The group fell into a contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The Alliance was a formidable adversary, but they were determined to rescue Rhea. As they approached the next wormhole, the AIS voice echoed through the cabin. Prepare for entry into wormhole in T-1 minute. The ship shuddered slightly as it was drawn into the vortex, the stars outside blurring into streaks of light once more. The journey was far from over, but they were one step closer to their goal. During the transition through the wormhole, Endrick took a moment to reflect on his earlier conversation with Husarius. Gotta keep an eye out, he resolved to remain vigilant and protect Gustav's friends at all costs. As they emerged from the wormhole, the stars returned to their normal, twinkling selves. The AI announced their successful transition, and they continued on their course. Chapter 1502 Awakening in Bondage. Chapter 1502 Awakening in Bondage. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Angie slowly regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open to an unfamiliar sight. She was in a cold facility where the walls lined with a dull metallic sheen and harsh, clinical lights that reflected off the surfaces. There were ability dampeners spread across the walls. The air was thick with the buzz of machinery and the low murmur of voices. Before her was a transparent glass wall, beyond which lay another room. Her heart sank as she saw Gustav there, restrained and unconscious. His body was marked with dark, sinuous lines that seemed to pulse and move across his skin. Panic surged through her as she tried to move, only to find herself similarly restrained. Glowing cuffs bound her wrists and ankles, rendering her unable to harness any of her powers. She pulled against them, but it was futile. "Gustav," she whispered with her voice trembling in fear and desperation. In the hallway outside her cell, she noticed several MBO higher-ups and scientists. They were conversing in low tones, occasionally glancing in her direction. The atmosphere was tense and filled with an air of impending judgment. "Hey," Angie called out, her voice stronger now. "What's going on? Why am I restrained? Let me out of here." One of the higher-ups, a tall man with silver hair and a stern expression, turned to face her. His eyes were cold and devoid of empathy. "You're still undergoing observation," he said flatly. "We need to ensure you're no longer a threat." Angie's eyes blazed with fury. "And what about Gustav? What are you doing to him?" The man's gaze shifted to Gustav's unconscious form, then back to Angie. "He will undergo trials for his crimes against humanity and the universe at large." A surge of anger and despair overwhelmed Angie. "No. You don't understand. He's not guilty of anything. You can't do this to him." The higher-up's expression remained unchanged. "His actions speak for themselves. The evidence is overwhelming." Angie struggled against her restraints, her frustration mounting. "You're wrong. You have to listen to me. Let me stand trial instead." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The scientists continued their discussions, seemingly indifferent to her cries. In her desperation, Angie focused on Gustav. She pulled against the cuffs with all her might, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break free. "Please, you have to let him go." Her voice broke, tears welling in her eyes. "This is all my fault." The higher-up turned away, dismissing her words as inconsequential. Angie's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the gravity of their situation. Everything that had happened played in her mind, and she realized just how much of a mess she had made. She feared for what might happen to Gustav if these people had their way. Angie's eyes darted around the room, searching for any means of escape. She couldn't think of anything that didn't require her bloodline abilities. "You cowards. You only want to place blames on him for your selfish interests, don't you?" Angie's voice rang out. The higher-ups turned to face her with straight looks. "Gustav Crimson is responsible for the destruction of planet Osius. Has caused numerous damage across the cosmos since then. Escaping the pursuit of the MBO, destroying ships, abducting children of alien races and so many others." The one who had spoke before, voiced once more. "That is a very big lie. Gustav didn't destroy planet Osius. I was present there. And I'm sure everything else you bastards are pinning on him are false." Angie cried out with an enraged look. "Whatever you think is not our problem." As the heated back and forth between Angie and the higher-ups intensified, the air in the facility grew thick with tension. Angie's words fell on deaf ears as the higher-ups remained resolute in their decision to keep her restrained and to put Gustav on trial. The scientists, too, seemed indifferent to her cries, focused on their data and instruments. Just then, the doors to the hallway swung open with a loud creak, and an imposing figure stepped into the room. The presence of Jack, the most powerful mixed blood, cast a long shadow over the proceedings. His towering form and the raw aura emanating from him commanded immediate attention and respect. The higher-ups and scientists turned their heads in unison, their expressions shifting from stern determination to wary caution. "I made a promise to Gustav," Jack announced with his voice resonating through the room. "Angie is in my care." The higher-ups exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, a woman with sharp features and steely eyes, stepped forward. "Jack, you know how proceedings work. We cannot simply release her. Observations need to be completed first." Jack's eyes, filled with the pride of strength, bore into her. He was usually more overlooking and followed orders to the latter, but he was also something who stuck to his word. "Gustav has done more to protect this world than most of you realize. Anyways, as I have stated, Angie is in my care. I am more than capable of making sure she poses no more threat." Angie, still restrained, looked at Jack with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Jack, what will happen to Gustav? she asked in a trembling tone. Jack's gaze softened as he turned to her. I'm not sure, Angie, but I promise you this, I will do my best to help him. If he truly isn't guilty of these charges, I will make sure he is set free. One of the higher-ups, an older man with graying hair and a stern expression, stepped forward. Jack, are you betraying humanity by siding with them? He voiced in suspicion. Jack's eyes narrowed as a palpable wave of power rippled through the room. Betraying humanity? No. I am ensuring that true justice is served. I will make sure that everything is done fairly and that no one is condemned without a proper trial. The scientists, who had been silently observing, now shifted uneasily. One of them, a young woman with auburn hair, spoke up. But the data we have. It points to significant anomalies. We can't ignore that. Jack turned his attention to her with an unreadable expression. You can hold on to Gustav for a bit, but she will be coming with me. Angie's eyes were filled with tears, both of relief and lingering fear. Jack, please. You have to save him. He doesn't deserve this. Jack nodded. I understand, Angie. But for now, you need to stay strong. We will wait till he regains consciousness. The higher-ups seemed to be at an impasse. The woman's steely eyes met Jack's unwavering gaze. We cannot simply hand over jurisdiction because of your promise. Protocol must be followed. Jack's presence seemed to grow even more formidable as the very air crackled with his energy. Angie is under my protection, and I will oversee her care. The higher-ups exchanged worried looks. They knew challenging Jack outright could lead to dire consequences. The graying man spoke again, his tone more conciliatory. Jack, we understand your position. But there must be a way to balance this without undermining the authority of the MBO. Jack took a deep breath, visibly calming himself. All I ask is for fairness. Angie has been freed of the dark control. I witnessed it happen. Will the MBO not take my word for it? She has already been put through enough, and any further sequence would be a travesty of justice. I stand for justice regardless of the situation. The scientists began to whisper among themselves, their uncertainty evident. The auburn-haired woman stepped forward again. What about the dark energy? Gustav has absorbed everything. She is free. He is the only one that I will allow you observe. Jack glanced at Gustav as the dark marks writhing across his unconscious form. We need to understand how it affects him. He can be monitored until then but not mistreated. The higher-ups huddled together, their voices low but urgent. After a tense few moments, the steely-eyed woman turned back to Jack. We will agree to your terms, Jack. Angie will be placed under your care, and we will ensure that Gustav receives a fair trial. But we will not tolerate any further interference. Jack nodded as the tension in the room eased slightly. That's all I ask. The restraints on Angie began to loosen, and she was finally freed. She rubbed her wrists with a slightly relieved expression. Thank you, Jack. Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's all right. You should probably get a good look at him now before you go. I doubt they will let you visit after this. The higher-ups and scientists slowly dispersed after Jack asked for a moment of privacy. As the room emptied, Jack and Angie stood by Gustav's side. Angie had a face full of emotions as she stared at him. This is all my fault. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she reached out to touch Gustav's face. Chapter 1503 The Modified Narrative. Chapter 1503 The Modified Narrative. Author's note. Unedited chapter. Gustav's consciousness drifted through a void of endless darkness. The inky blackness seemed to stretch on forever, punctuated only by a chilling silence that made him feel profoundly alone. His thoughts were interrupted by a sinister voice that echoed through the emptiness. Its tone was dripping with malice and mockery. So, this is the grand outworldly, reduced to floating in the abyss, the voice sneered. How foolish the action you took was, Gustav. Gustav's eyes narrowed in the darkness. He had felt this presence ever since he assimilated Angie's form of darkness. It was a part of him now, but it wasn't welcome. You're delusional if you think you can take control, Gustav retorted coolly. I will assimilate you, dominate you. It's only a matter of time. A cold, mirthless laugh echoed through the void. You think you can dominate the darkness that has existed since the beginning of time? Impossible, even for you. If I had a cent for every time someone told me something was impossible, I'd be a billionaire, Gustav stated with an unfettered tone. The voice seemed to shift, as if circling him like a predator. Why waste your time protecting beings from a plane that has branded you a universal fugitive? Gustav laughed in defiance. I'm not doing it for them. I do it for my loved ones. Ah, your loved ones, the voice mused with its tone dripping with sarcasm. So if your loved ones were eliminated, you would stop being a protector. A surge of killing intent erupted from Gustav the moment he heard that. I'll advise you to watch what you say because it could be the last thing you ever say. The sinister voice laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. I have my answer. Your loved ones are your weakness. The surroundings in the physical world began to tremble. The containment facility shook, causing the scientists and MBO officers to struggle for breath. Angie, who was standing before him, felt the oppressive weight of Gustav's killing intent pressing down on her. She watched in horror as the facility seemed to buckle under the immense pressure. What is going on? All scientists fell to their knees, choking as the oppressiveness swept across the region. Meanwhile, back in the void, the voice vanished, leaving Gustav alone with his thoughts. The oppressive atmosphere lingered briefly before finally calming. In the physical realm, Jack stood before the scientists and MBO officers who had rushed back to the enclosure after the killing intent reduced. Whatever is happening to him, it's causing this instability. One of the scientists stepped forward. Even his killing intent is powerful enough to cause death. We need to understand the nature of this dark energy. If we can isolate it, we might be able to stabilize him. He's fighting something terrible inside him. I couldn't win, but I believe he is stronger. I will help however I can, Angie voiced from the side. Gustav's consciousness drifted into a meditative state, seeking to quell the unprecedented altercation of darkness spreading from the root of his core. The sinister voice that had taunted him earlier was a distant echo now. With every breath, Gustav focused on centering himself, drawing strength from the depths of his being. Meanwhile, Eldris, Falco, EE, and Endrick finally arrived at the location of the Alliance. The structure, shaped like a syringe, floated ominously in the vastness of space. At first, it seemed tiny, almost insignificant against the display of distant stars. But as their spacecraft drew closer, the structure began to expand, revealing its true size. White spatial lights cascaded down like a waterfall, bathing the surroundings in an ethereal glow. This place is massive, Falco muttered, his eyes wide with awe. I agree, but stay focused, Eldris replied with a straight gaze. Remember the plan. Their spacecraft approached the lights, and as it passed through, the scene before them transformed. They appeared inside a vast, bustling hub, filled with Alliance Corp members moving about with purpose. This vicinity didn't look like it had ceilings. The top was a view of space with glistening stars twinkling and distant galaxies. Protocols were being meticulously followed, with spacecraft coming in and out, each one undergoing thorough checks. Identification, please, a stern-faced officer demanded to the Corp members ahead of the four. We need to provide that rhombus-cubed identification, Eldris said through their mind comms while glancing at the others. They had prepared for this and each had a particular high-grade technological device in their possession, but the rhombus-shaped cube was still missing. EE created miniature vortexes to discreetly consume the identification cubes from some unsuspecting Corp members who had just gone in. He handed the cubes to the rest of the group just as it was their turn. Time mirage. Endrick's index finger glowed as he twirled it slightly. Replicas of the identification cubes EE had stolen appeared in the possession of the Corp members he had taken them from. This way, they wouldn't know they fakes until the time limit of the ability was reached. Hopefully the group would be done with their business here by then. Although these cubes were specifically for personal identification data, the specialty of the secret tech in their possession would rewrite the data in the cube and tailor-make it to become theirs so they can appear on the Alliance Corp database. Another stern-faced officer approached them, scanning their faces with suspicion. Identification, please. Eldris, Falco, EE, and Endrick presented their cubes with ease. The officer scanned each one, his gaze lingering on them for what felt like an eternity. The seconds stretched and tension slowly began to build. "Welcome," the officer finally said, stepping aside. "Proceed." They reached a particular distance before exhaling collectively. "That was close," Endrick whispered. "Let's keep moving," Eldris urged while taking the lead. They followed the necessary proceedings, blending in with the other corp members. Each step they took felt like walking a tightrope. The threat of discovery was ever present. The interior of the Alliance structure was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one more imposing than the last. The place where Alliance leaders held their meetings was at the far east, while the Alliance gatherings were held in a different position. The sights here were marvelous beyond words. It was like an extremely modern city floating in deep space. "We need to find out where they are holding Rhea," Falco said while his eyes scanned the area. Dietrich said cell block Delt 7. "We need to find out where prisoners are kept first," Eldris chipped in. As they navigated through the Alliance, they encountered several checkpoints. At each one, they presented their stolen identification cubes, maintaining their cover. At one point, they nearly stumbled. A particularly vigilant officer scrutinized their identifications, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. He asked a series of probing questions, and for a moment, it seemed their cover was about to be blown. "Where were you stationed before this?" the officer demanded, his gaze sharp. "Sector 14, under Commander Vexus," Eldris replied smoothly with a steady tone. The officer's eyes flicked between them, weighing their words. The silence stretched, each second a heartbeat. "Very well," he said finally, stepping aside. "Proceed." They moved forward as the tension eased slightly. Every step felt like a gamble, but they pressed on, driven by the need to rescue Rhea. Eldris had overheard some corp members discussing, and the name Commander Vexus came up. To save their cover, he had to use it. Finally, they reached a more secluded part of the complex, a section that seemed less frequented by the bustling corp members. There were rectangular-shaped structures that looked like pillars reaching the very top. The rectangular-shaped structures were lined in rows and one could move in between them. EE glanced around as his eyes narrowed. "This looks like it might be the right place." "Yeah, but this is Block A. I think we still need to move further in," Falco responded with narrowed eyes. Across the Earth, news outlets were abuzz with breaking news. Gustav Crimson, the planet destroyer, had been captured. Headlines flashed across screens, and newscasters spoke with barely concealed excitement. "Gustav Crimson, the most wanted fugitive in the universe, has finally been apprehended," one reporter announced, her tone triumphant. "Thanks to the efforts of Jack, the most powerful mixed blood, the threat has been neutralized." As images of Gustav, restrained and in a darkened state, filled the screens, the narrative was clear: Gustav was the villain, and Jack was the hero. The masses, unaware of the true events that had unfolded, cheered the news. Their fear of Gustav's power had clouded their judgment. Meanwhile, in a quieter part of Plankton City, a far different story was unfolding. Angie, now fully human and free of the darkness that had consumed her, stood before a door. Her heart raced as she approached the door with her hands trembling in anticipation. Her parents hadn't seen her in over a year. She wondered how they would react. If they had moved on with their lives completely, or if she even still had a place here for worrying them all this time. Chapter 1504 The Beatdown. Chapter 1504 The Beatdown. Author's note. Unedited chapter. She decided to throw all of these thoughts to the back of her mind and proceeded to knock softly. Calm. 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 Her heart was in her throat as she waited. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing her mother. A look of shock and disbelief appeared on her slightly wrinkled face with visible eye bags. "Angie," her mother whispered as tears welled up in her eyes. "Mom," Angie replied as her voice slowly broke down. "It's me. I'm home." Her mother let out a sob, immediately pulling Angie into a tight embrace. "Oh, my baby." Mr. Valandrabadia appeared behind her mother with an expression of both shock and overwhelming relief. Angie, he repeated with an emotional tone. Is it really you? Angie nodded with tears streaming down her face. I'm home, Dad. I'm really home. They enveloped her in their arms, holding her as if they would never let go. The numerous months of worry, fear, and uncertainty melted away in that moment of reunion, replaced by the warmth of their love. We never gave up hope, her mother said with a trembling tone. Every day, we prayed that you one day find your way back to us. I'm sorry, Angie whispered, her voice filled with guilt. I'm so sorry for putting you and Dad through so much worry. Her mother cupped her face while looking into her eyes. You have nothing to apologize for, Angie. We know it wasn't your fault. The important thing is that you're back with us now, Angie's father said with a soft tone. They guided her inside, leading her to the living room where she sank into the familiar comfort of the couch. Her parents sat on either side of her, their hands never leaving hers, as if they needed the physical connection to believe she was truly there. Where have you been all this time? Her father asked gently. It's a long story, Angie replied with a disturbed look. I was trapped somewhere for a very long time. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. Her mother squeezed her hand with tears streaming down her face. We're just so grateful that you're safe now. As they talked, the holographic television in the background continued to broadcast the news of Gustav's capture. Angie glanced at the screen and her heart ached as she spotted this. She knew the truth of what had happened, the sacrifices Gustav had made. Seeing him painted as a villain was a bitter pill to swallow. Mom, Dad, she began with a steady voice. There's something I need to tell you about Gustav. He's not what they say he is. Her parents exchanged a worried glance but nodded for her to continue. Gustav, he saved me, she revealed with a firm tone. He never stopped trying even when it seemed impossible. He sacrificed himself to make sure I could come back to you. Her father frowned with his brow furrowing. But the news, they say he's responsible for what happened at Aesop. For the destruction of the planet and your disappearance as well. Angie shook her head vehemently. They are wrong. Gustav fought to protect everyone. If anything, he should be getting praised because no one would have returned if it wasn't for him. He doesn't deserve what's happening to him. Her mother's face displayed a look of realization as she recalled what happened at their last encounter. We didn't treat him so well the last time even when he promised to save you, she muttered with a remorseful look. He deserves an apology. Even after everything that had been thrown at him, he still stuck to his word and saved you. Mr. Valandrabadia was equally as remorseful. Everyone really painted the narrative a different way when he is in fact a savior. I just wish there was a way to make everyone see the truth. We'll do whatever we can to help, Angie, her father said with a thoughtful gaze while placing a hand on her shoulder. They wanted to hear more on exactly all of Angie's experiences, but she wasn't interested in giving them full details. She didn't want to cause more panic than necessary. How could she ever let her parents know that they were up against a literal being that could swallow up the face of this plane's existence? Where is Phil? Angie asked of her little brother. He is in school, Angie's mother answered. It's been too long. He must have grown bigger by now. A smile appeared on Angie's face as she thought of her brother. He has. But before he returns, there is something you should know. Phil has been. In the bustling courtyard of Echelon High School, students milled about during their lunch break. The school, which was a blend of high-grade architecture and lush greenery, boasted spacious grounds and state-of-the-art facilities. Large trees provided shade over neatly manicured lawns, while pathways lined with flowers wound between buildings. This was the exact high school Gustav had graduated from about 4 years back. A tall and striking young man with silver hair and a unicorn-like horn protruding from his forehead stood near a group of his friends. Despite being only 16 and in his second year, his 6-foot-tall frame and slightly muscular build made him stand out. Hey, Phil, a sneering voice called out. Phil turned to see Marcus, a Year 3 senior, swaggering towards him with a group of cronies. Marcus was infamous for his bullying, using his bloodline abilities to intimidate others. Today, his target was the infamous Phil of Echelon High. It would seem that he didn't care about the scary rumors he had heard about Phil. Your sister, Angie, she's Gustav's whore, isn't she? Marcus jeered, drawing the attention of the surrounding students. Phil's eyes narrowed as a surge of anger immediately flooded through him. Take that back, Marcus. Marcus laughed, enjoying the reaction. Why should I? Everyone knows Gustav's been captured and your sister has been gone for ages. What does that say about her? The students around them murmured, watching the confrontation with growing interest. Among them, several girls couldn't help but admire Phil. He was said to be fiery and bold. Now they were seeing it in person. Shut up! Phil shouted while his horn began to glow with a silver light. You don't know anything about my sister. Oh, I know plenty, Marcus taunted. I know she's probably dead or worse because she dated that fugitive. You're just as pathetic as she is. The insult pushed Phil over the edge. His body began to shift, muscles bulging, and silver fur sprouting all over his skin. His horn lengthened and sharpened, and his eyes took on a feral gleam. Get ready to eat your words, Phil growled, his voice now a deep, rumbling snarl. Marcus' cronies stepped back, sensing the imminent fight. Marcus, however, grinned and raised his hands. Sheets of paper materialized around him, swirling in the air before forming into tightly controlled bombs. You think you can take me on, beast boy? Marcus sneered. Without another word, Phil charged. With his transformation complete, he was now a large beast covered in shimmering silver fur. His horn crackled with energy as he moved with surprising speed for his size, closing the distance between them in an instant. Marcus hurled a volley of paper bombs at Phil, each one exploding with a deafening bang. Phil roared in pain as the blasts tore into his fur and skin, sending him flying across the air. Phil rammed into a tree but didn't stay down for a single second before charging forward again. Oh, that didn't take you down. Here's more, Marcus voiced while swiping his fingers forward continuously. Boom, boom, boom. Controlled explosions with a tiny range but very effective damage rang out across the place. However, it looked like Phil had suddenly developed some kind of tolerance as he kept pushing further despite getting hit with these powerful blasts. Impossible. He should have lost a limb by now. Marcus couldn't believe his eyes as he cranked up the explosions. He hadn't heard of Phil's ferocity. Phil's powerful legs propelled him forward, and he lashed out with a swipe of his massive clawed hand. Marcus barely managed to dodge, the claws grazing his arm and leaving deep gashes. Blood spattered the ground, and Marcus' grin faltered. You're going to regret that, Marcus hissed, launching more paper bombs. Phil's horn glowed brighter, and he shot a beam of silver energy from its tip. The beam cut through the air, intercepting the paper bombs and causing them to explode prematurely. The force of the explosions pushed Marcus back, and he stumbled, his control wavering. Phil seized the opportunity, leaping into the air and descending hard on Marcus. His claws raked across Marcus' chest, and he followed up with a powerful headbutt as his horn cracked against Marcus' skull. Marcus cried out in pain as a long bloody line appeared on his head, but he wasn't done yet. With a desperate effort, he summoned a massive sheet of paper and wrapped it around Phil, trying to suffocate him. Phil roared, thrashing wildly with his claws tearing at the paper. Chapter 1505 Phil's Newfound Conviction. Chapter 1505 Phil's Newfound Conviction. Author's note. Unedited chapter. The students watching from the sidelines gasped, their admiration for Phil growing as they witnessed this. I've heard of how he beats boys older than him up, but I've never witnessed it. He is so hot. Several girls whispered excitedly to each other, their crushes on him solidifying as they watched him fight. Phil's rage and strength peaked and he shredded the paper cocoon. With a final, ferocious roar, he lunged at the battered Marcus, pinning him to the ground. His claws dug into Marcus' shoulders, and he bared his teeth in a snarl. Apologize, Phil growled, his voice barely human. Take back what you said about my sister. Blooded and beaten, Marcus looked up at Phil with fear in his eyes. Okay, I take it back. I'm sorry. Phil hesitated for a moment while letting out heavy breaths. Then, with a final growl, he released Marcus and stepped back. His form slowly returned to normal. His silver fur receded, and his horn returned to its usual size. Marcus lay on the ground, clutching his wounds and glaring up at Phil. "You'll pay for this," he spat, but his voice lacked the conviction it had before. Phil ignored him, turning away and walking towards the edge of the courtyard. The students parted to let him through. Their faces were filled with respect. Among them, several girls watched him go while some approached, but he completely ignored them with a disinterested look. "This is all your fault, Gustav," Phil roared in his mind as he walked away. He didn't mind the injuries on his body as well. He moved to a secluded location and sat with a pensive look of sadness. "Big sister. Just where are you?" He had no idea that Angie had returned. Back at the courtyard, teachers arrived, dispersing the crowd and tending to Marcus' injuries. The whole school would soon hear about the fight, but Phil didn't care. Phil sat in the principal's office, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. Principal McGregor, an older man with thinning grey hair and a stern expression, peered at him over the rim of his glasses. The office was adorned with awards and certificates. It had an air of authority that made students uncomfortable. "Phil, fighting on school grounds is strictly prohibited unless during monitored trainings," Principal McGregor said with a firm tone. Phil took a deep breath, trying to steady his anger. "Marcus was talking trash about my sister. He called her Gustav's whore and said she was probably dead because of him." Principal McGregor's expression softened slightly but remained resolute. "I understand that you were upset, Phil, but you should have reported the incident to a teacher." "Fut reported. Like y'all don't lick the arses of his father. Y'all won't do shit, so I took matters into my own hand." Phil's anger burst through like a dam. "Watch your tone, young man," Principal McGregor voiced as his smile vanished. TCH, Phil folded his arms and tried to calm himself. Resorting to violence only escalates the situation. "As it stands, you will have to face the consequences of your actions," Principal McGregor stated. Phil's shoulders slumped in defeat. "What kind of punishment?" "You will serve a week with manual workers and write a formal apology to Marcus," Principal McGregor stated. "Furthermore, you will be required to attend anger management sessions." Phil nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. "Is that all?" The principal gave a curt nod. "You're dismissed. Make sure you think about your actions and how to handle such situations better in the future." Phil left the office without uttering another word. The day had been exhausting, and all he wanted was to go home. As he exited the school building and headed to the hover bus stop, he couldn't shake off his frustration. Phil boarded an hover bus and found an empty seat by the window. The streets were filled with people, hover cars, and various advertisements on large digital screens as usual. As the bus glided smoothly through the city, Phil's eyes were drawn to one of the giant screens displaying breaking news. Gustav's face appeared on the screen, and a news anchor's voice echoed through the bus. "Gustav, the infamous fugitive, has been captured and is currently being held at a high-security facility. Authorities praise Jack for the successful capture, and citizens are urged to remain vigilant." Phil's already knew of the news, but his jaw tightened, and his fists clenched again. "This is all because of you, Gustav," he muttered under his breath. "If it weren't for you, Angie wouldn't have disappeared." The bus continued its journey, and Phil tried to push the thoughts away. As he neared his neighborhood, he thought of Angie once more and sighed. He stepped off the bus and walked down the familiar streets, lost in his thoughts. When he turned the corner onto his street, he saw a figure standing near their house. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the silhouette. Angie stood there with her long silver and pink hair blowing gently in the breeze. He had never seen it get this long because Angie was fond of cutting it, which made it harder for him to believe his eyes. "Big sister." Phil's voice cracked as he called out her name. Angie's face lit up with a smile, and she rushed towards him. "Phil." Phil ran to her, and they embraced tightly, both overwhelmed with emotion. Tears gathered in Phil's eyes as he held his sister in joy and disbelief. "I thought I'd never see you again," Phil whispered. Angie held him tighter with a slightly surprised expression due to his height. "I'm here now, Phil. I'm back." They pulled back slightly, and Phil looked at her with a mixture of awe and confusion. What happened? Where have you been all this time? Angie took a deep breath. It's a long story, Phil. Let's go inside. They walked into the house, and Phil's heart felt lighter than it had in months. Inside, their parents were glad that the whole family was back together again. After the initial excitement settled, Angie noticed the injuries on Phil's cheeks that hadn't healed and asked him what happened. Got into a fight, Phil answered bluntly. Angie placed a hand on his shoulder. Yeah, you gotta stop doing that. Mum and Dad told me everything. Phi looked a bit embarrassed as he turned to stare at his parents sitting at a corner. His eyes screamed, "Why did you tell her?" It turned out that Phil had been getting into a lot of fights since his sister disappeared and Gustav was branded a fugitive. Everyone was well aware that his sister was dating Angie, so a lot of times they came up with false and insulting narratives to poke at him. Phil's mood had turned terrible after the loss of Angie. He had a very bad temper and dealt with everything using his fists. He even sometimes got into scuffles in the neighborhood and with his parents sometimes. If you're looking for remorse, you won't find one here. I don't regret beating all those people up. Phil folded his arms in defiance. When did you get so cheeky? Angie pulled Hyas' cheeks, finding his expression adorable. Ouch, Phil rubbed his cheeks with a pout. I'm not asking you to be remorseful, just learn to control your anger. You don't need to be physical all the time. On a side note, thank you for standing up for me. Angie displayed a sweet smile. Reminds me of Gustav. This is exactly how hot-headed he was back then. Angie chuckled slightly as she added. Don't compare me to that fugitive. Phil jumped up in anguish. Isn't he the reason you disappeared in the first place? He added. Angie sat Phil down with a pull and decided to give him a brief explanation of what had happened. She left out a lot of things but gave him the same level of information that her parents received so as not to cause too much panic. Gustav, he saved me. He risked everything to bring me back and free me from the control, Angie said with an emotional look. Phil's face fell in guilt. So, Gustav isn't the villain everyone thinks he is? Angie shook her head. No, he isn't. Has been branded a fugitive because people don't understand. The government and media is controlling the narrative. Phil sat back, processing everything. I can't believe it. I blamed him for your disappearance. Even the fight at school today was because they insulted you using Gustav. I am trying to get the charges off him and change the narrative. After all he has done, the world shouldn't be against him. Angie leaned back with a sigh. Phil nodded in understanding and newfound determination eyes. I will. I'll do whatever it takes to help him. Within a dark space, Gustav's consciousness floated with closed eyes. After this isolation, I should be able to contact someone in the outside world. I need to be quick or it will be too late to save them. Chapter 1506 Ethereal Impossibility. Chapter 1506 Ethereal Impossibility. Author's note. Do not unlock, just do it, Stark mumbled. Memory siphoning has been activated. As Gustav activated the ability, a rush of images and sensations flooded through him. The first memory was Stark touching the ancient pamphlet, his fingers trembling as he made contact. Instantly, a deluge of visions cascaded into Stark's consciousness, visions now shared with Gustav. The scenes were chaotic and intense. Gustav, riding the warp demolator, unwittingly triggers a cataclysmic event. With the warp demolator instability, which somewhat had something to do with Gustav's involvement in its movement, a fragmented trails of ashiness breaks off from the pile and ends up appearing on Earth. The Vertigan premises, to be exact. A corruption is unleashed, enveloping everything in its path. Gustav finds himself ensnared, in the location he ends up after riding the op demolator, unable to escape and come give assistance as disaster unfolds. The Vertigan Island is on fire. In order to stop the corruption from spreading further, the world comes together to wipe them out. The lineage of the Vertigan family, once proud and influential, withers in the blaze, their legacy reduced to ashes. A fragment of another memory shows a later scene, a devastated Gustav, his face etched with defeat and sorrow, carrying the lifeless body of Stark through the remnants of what was once a vibrant island. The weight of his failure, the destruction of a family he inadvertently caused, hangs heavily on him. Gustav pulls away from Stark at this moment with a look of distress as his mind returns to the present. So it's true. I told you. I needed you to see it, to understand why I did what I did. I couldn't let that future come to pass. Stark breathed profusely while trying to recover from the siphon's toll. Gustav stood in place with a contemplative look while the impact of the visions still toiled through his mind. While I get it, I can't just accept that outcome. There must be something that can be done to change it. That's one of the reasons I brought you here, away from the Demolator. Not just to protect my family, but to give us a chance to find another way. Together. I understand it is paramount for you to get to where the Warp Demolator is heading, Stark voiced with a hopeful tone. And if we can't find another way? What then? We sacrifice everything and everyone else just to save your family? Gustav questioned with a tinge of annoyance. If it was you, what would you have done? Stark asked while lowering his head. This question caused a brief silence as Gustav pictured choosing between saving his loved ones and saving the world. Let's not pretend that you wouldn't fuck the world over to save your friends, the system chipped in. Whose side are you on? The side of reason. You know the meaning of that word? Did you Google it? Fuck you. Gustav decided to ignore the system and turned to face Stark. You better pray that we find another way. For everyone's sake, Gustav's tone hinted at accepting the collaboration. Stark looked at Gustav, his eyes solemn, understanding the enormity of the choices before them. Thank you for giving me a chance. As the Warp Demolator receded into the void of space, leaving behind a trail of cosmic unrest, Endrik, Ealdris, Falco, and Rhea remained aboard their spacecraft, their faces etched with concern and confusion. They had expected Gustav to appear at the last moment or something, but his absence now cast a shadow over their mission. Now the Warp Demolator was gone. Rhea, staring out into the now calm space, broke the silence. Gustav. He's definitely okay, right? His voice carried a mixture of hope and worry. He has to be. Gustav survived worse. But with his disappearance and without the Warp Demolator taking him to where planet Humbad Remnants is located, I'm not sure what our next move should be, Ealdris chipped in. Endrik then recalled the mysterious being that had intervened during their most perilous moment. The figure's glowing silhouette had prevented a disaster, but its identity remained a puzzle. Endrik, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, ventured, that being. Could it have been Miss Amy? It reminded me of her. Rhea raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Miss Amy? Didn't she retreat to that planet she created after the ISOP? Why would she appear here, and in the Warp Demolator, of all places? Ealdris, nodding slowly, added, it surely makes no sense for it to be her since that being appeared from the interior of the Warp Demolator. But then, the discussion spiraled into theories and recounts of Miss Amy's known capabilities and last known actions. Her legend as one of the universe's most formidable beings made her a subject of endless speculation. Falco, trying to make sense of the events, suggested, as much as it seems unlikely, who else could rip us away from the pull of something as powerful as the Warp Demolator? And then to dive back into it. That's not something just anyone could do even if they were alpha ranked, and she is beyond that level of power, Ealdris added. Ealdris initiated the emergency thrusters, the spacecraft's engines roaring to life as they attempted to aid Endrik's telekinetic push. The combined effort caused the ship to tremble violently, straining against the immense gravitational force of the Warp Demolator. Thrusters at full power. Outside, the Warp Demolator seemed almost alive, its ashy, serpentine body writhing and expanding as it consumed the cosmic matter in its path. The spectacle was terrifying. Orbital bodies that had taken eons to form were now mere playthings in the grip of this celestial behemoth. As the spacecraft struggled to maintain its position, the crew watched helplessly as the Warp Demolator's path of travel became increasingly erratic. The situation aboard the spacecraft grew increasingly dire as the Warp Demolator's gravitational pull intensified beyond Endrik's capacity to manage. His telekinetic shield shimmered with strain, the protective energy waning as the colossal entity grew even larger, its ashy tendrils swirling menacingly closer. Endrick's face contorted with effort and sweat beading on his brow, gritted his teeth. I can't hold it much longer. It's too strong. He didn't have this much struggle splitting an entire planet, but who knew something like this could be so difficult? Endrick wanted to make sure direct contact was not made because none of them were aware of what effects it would bring, but as things were. It's growing. We're not going to make it if it gets much closer, Eldris announced with a tone of urgency. The crew braced themselves as the spacecraft began to shudder violently, the edges of the warp demolator's ashy trail licking the outer hull, enveloping them in darkness. It seemed as though they would be consumed whole by the cosmic phenomenon they had sought to intercept. Falco was preparing to head out there and brace the warp demolator with his bare body so as to push them from harm's way, but Eldris and Rhea were not having it. There was no way he'd be able to handle such. Suddenly, a miraculous sight unfolded. From the heart of the ashy chaos, a brilliant silver glow emerged, its radiance piercing through the darkness like a celestial beacon. An ethereal being, its form obscured by the intense luminosity it emitted, approached the spacecraft. The crew watched in awe and confusion as the glowing entity reached out with what appeared to be arms of pure light. With a graceful, powerful motion, the being pushed against the spacecraft. The force of its intervention was gentle yet firm, countering the pull of the warp demolator with a precision that seemed beyond the capabilities of any known entity. What in the universe is that? Falco couldn't hide his shock. As the being exerted its influence, the spacecraft felt the oppressive ashy grip loosening. Slowly, but with undeniable strength, the ethereal figure maneuvered them away from the belly of the warp demolator. The ash receded from the hull, revealing once again the stars beyond. The silver being, its task seemingly complete, gave one last push that sent the spacecraft into a stable path away from the destructive path of the warp demolator. As it withdrew, the glow around it pulsated warmly and almost reassuringly. A day ago, just check my memories if you think I'm lying. The visions will prove my claim, amidst heavy breaths Stark suggested. Gustav's grip on Stark's neck loosened as he contemplated the suggestion to delve into Stark's memories. The revelation that Stark knew about his rarely used ability to siphon memories was unsettling. This power, known to wreak havoc on the mind of the person it was used on, and it seemed Stark knew more about the existence of the outworldly than he thought. Stark's insistence and the gravity of the situation prompted Gustav's acceptance. He never spared his enemies, but he was looking for a reason to give Stark the benefit of the doubt. Gustav placed his hand firmly on Stark's temple while Stark braced himself, closing his eyes in anticipation of the invasive probe. "This is gonna hurt," Gustav stated with an emotionless tone. Chapter 1507 On Site. Chapter 1507 On Site. Author's note: do not unlock. Some had weapons while others had activated their supernatural abilities, ready to face the group. Falco stepped forward as his body emanated a dark aura. "Like hell we will." With a wave of his hand, Falco summoned tendrils of dark energy that lashed out towards the approaching guards. The tendrils smashed into the ground, causing the floor to crack and the guards to scatter. EE was already thinking ahead. "We need to find another way out. There's no way we can fight all of them head-on." Endrick nodded, his mind racing. "Follow me." Honestly, it's hard to say what we'll find. Miss Amy is unpredictable. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that she's continued creating life. She aims to craft a world far different from Earth's, full of diversity and harmony, Gustav responded with a reminiscent look. As they boarded the spacecraft, the bodyguards took their positions at the controls, and Gustav settled next to Stark. The bay doors slowly retracted. With a smooth surge of power, the spacecraft lifted off, leaving Earth's atmosphere in a streak of light. As they ascended, Gustav's mind drifted to his past interactions with Miss Amy. He remembered the lush landscapes she had shown him, teeming with life creatures of her own design, each species more fascinating than the last. Miss Amy stood before a sprawling vista, her hand sweeping over a field dotted with two-headed creatures grazing under a colorful sky. "Here," she had said, "I will create a sanctuary where all the life forms I create can coexist in balance. A model of what any world could be, free from strife and inequality." Gustav felt a pang of nostalgia and a deep-seated curiosity about how much her world had evolved since his last visit. He pulled himself back to the present as their ship broke free from Earth's gravitational pull and entered the open cosmos. "Space travel still amazes me every time," Stark mumbled while peering forward. With his eyes, he could see every nook and cranny of the exterior of the spacecraft. "How far until we reach Aegon?" Gustav questioned. "We're looking at just over a day's journey with the current hyperdrive settings since Aegon is situated at the edge of the Milky Way," Stark answered informatively. The journey through space was smooth, with the vast starlit void offering a display of serene beauty. Stark occasionally attempted to draw out more stories from Gustav, who remained somewhat reticent, lost in his thoughts. "You really respect her, don't you? Miss Amy, I mean. More than respect, Stark. I owe her my life. I was hoping I wouldn't need her help anymore until all this was over, but I guess there is no other way," Gustav voiced with a look of admiration and perturbation. As they neared Aegon, the planet's image began to fill the viewport, a colossal world, its surface swirling with vibrant colors and cloud patterns that hinted at its dynamic atmosphere. "There it is. Aegon," Gustav announced. "Wow, it truly is 4 times the size of Earth. Very breathtaking. To think one being could create all this, it's beyond what I thought possible." Stark couldn't imagine just how powerful Miss Amy was. Although he had very much witnessed her might at Aesop, it was an entirely different scenario to physically be in the presence of an orbital body she created. The spacecraft's approach was carefully calculated, as they prepared for descent. As their spacecraft approached the vibrant, swirling atmosphere of Aegon, Gustav and Stark were suddenly jolted by an unexpected resistance. A shimmering barrier, invisible until now, materialized just as their ship was about to enter the planet's orbit. Stark, startled by the sudden halt, looked over at Gustav with concern. "What's happening? Why can't we move forward?" Gustav's brow furrowed in confusion and surprise, responded, This wasn't here before. Miss Amy must have later put this in place to prevent external entry. But she should be aware of my presence by now. Why isn't she taking the barrier down?" Gustav wondered out loud. It was impossible for anything to pass Miss Amy by since she became a goddess, so Gustav expected her to have sensed their spacecraft long before it got to this point. Trying to understand the situation, Gustav instructed the ship's AI to attempt a gentle push forward, but the barrier remained impassive, its surface repelling every advance with increasing force. "Let's not force it. We might damage the ship or worse, trigger a countermeasure we're not prepared for." Uncle Bela watched in amazement as Gustav interacted with the newly revived NID. The artifact, long dormant and silent within the depths of the Vertigan vaults, now pulsed with a vibrant, mystical energy. "Mr. Crimson, to use don't worry, I understand how it works," Gustav cut Uncle Bela off. He proceeded to place his palm flat against the NID, and the device responded immediately, its surface shimmering with an ethereal glow. The rhythmic pulsing seemed to sync with Gustav's own energy, creating a resonance that filled the room with a palpable sense of anticipation. Gustav's thoughts were singular. I need to find a way to get to the remnants of planet Humbad. He held on to this intention, willing the NID to provide a path forward. After a tense few moments, the artifact responded. A projection of shimmering letters floated in the air before them, **** planet Aegon. ***. Gustav stepped back, his surprise evident. Aegon? That's the name Miss Amy calls her planet. The room fell silent as the NID powered down, its task seemingly complete. Uncle Bela, breaking the silence, confirmed what the machine had implied. It seems that whatever you need, Gustav, is tied to planet Aegon. According to our ancestors, the NID has never been wrong. Gustav, puzzled, murmured to himself, but why there? What could possibly be on Miss Amy's planet that relates to Humbad or the Warp Demolator? Miss Amy's planet was still a very new one, so it didn't make any sense to him. Stark chimed in, "Remember, Miss Amy isn't just your former master. She's a creator of worlds, a manipulator of cosmic scales. There is every possibility that she has foresight of the current predicament." The idea resonated with Gustav, but he was still skeptical about it. You might be right. I guess the only way to find out is by heading there. I'll arrange for transport, Stark voiced in response. And I'll gather some supplies for your journey, Uncle Bela added. I need to find a way to send a message. An intergalactic message, Gustav requested. Days had passed since the warp demolator's appearance and subsequent disappearance, leaving Eldris, Endrick, Falco, and Rhea adrift in uncertainty. They had been scouring the coordinates and searching for any trace of Gustav, their efforts fruitless and their morale dwindling. As they prepared to set a course for a nearby planet in hopes of finding assistance, the console beeped loudly, signaling an incoming transmission that immediately drew their attention. Falco, who was closest to the console, quickly tapped to accept the transmission. The familiar face of Gustav appeared in full vibrancy. Hey, guys. The group exchanged looks of relief mixed with confusion upon his appearance. Rival. We've searched everywhere, where did you vanish to? Rhea was the first to yell out. I'm on Earth, Gustav revealed. You're on Earth. How did you end up there? Falco voiced in shock. It's Stark's doing. It's a long story, I'll fill you in later. But I'm alright. We thought we lost you. How are you going to get back? Eldris inquired. I'm not coming back just yet. I'm actually about to head to Miss Amy's planet, Aegon. This revelation prompted a round of surprised murmurs among the group. Miss Amy's planet? Why? Endrick voiced in bafflement. It's related to something called the NID, an artifact that pointed me to Aegon. I think it's crucial for what comes next. Since I missed the warp demolator's appearance, this might be the only way I get to planet Humbad. The group listened intently as Gustav briefly explained his encounter with the NID and its mysterious guidance. So, what do you need us to do now? Head to the Milky Way to join you? Eldris inquired. No, that won't be necessary. You're over a month away, and I can't have you trailing behind that long. Instead, I need you to fix up my ship. I believe by the time you're heading back, I would have gotten what I need. Okay, we could help with other things while you do what needs to be done, Endrick answered with a nod. Thanks. I'll keep you posted on my progress and what I find out on Aegon. As the transmission faded, the crew sat back, processing the flurry of information. Gustav was safe, but the journey ahead was his alone to tread for now. They turned their attention to the task at hand, repairing Gustav's spacecraft and finding their way back without mishaps. We are gonna head for Earth afterwards, right? Rhea asked. You bet we are. Gustav and Stark stood in the dimly lit hangar, their spacecraft prepped and ready for departure. The air thrummed with the low rumble of the engines warming up, a subtle vibration underfoot that spoke of the power at their disposal. Beside them, two bodyguards in silver robes, their features obscured by the high collars and hoods, stood silent and alert. Gustav, checking over his own disguise, a similar silver robe that masked his identity, nodded to Stark. It's time to go. Although Gustav didn't shapeshift due to the numbers seeing Stark off, he wouldn't shy out of it when the time came. Stark, adjusting his own gear, looked at Gustav with a mix of excitement and apprehension. What should I expect out there, Gustav? It's not every day one travels to a planet crafted by a goddess. Chapter 1508 ONS. Chapter 1508 ONS. Author's note: do not unlock. Falco staggered back as his vision plunged into darkness. Falco! Endrick shouted while extending his hand to use telekinesis. He attempted to hurl Axaroth away, but his power rebounded off the Alliance leader, ineffective. Axaroth smirked, not even needing to move as he sent a forceful wave that smashed into Endrick, launching him across the room and into a wall with a sickening thud. Eldris transformed the environment into a kaleidoscope of shifting colors. He attempted to trap Axaroth in a prism of vibrant hues, a prison of light and color meant to immobilize. You're not invincible, Axaroth, he declared. Axaroth merely chuckled, his multiple limbs flexing as he shattered the colorful prison with ease. Pathetic, he growled while sprinting forward. He grabbing Eldris by the head and slammed him into the ground before he could react. The impact reverberated through the entire Alliance, causing its very foundation in space to tremble. Meanwhile, EE had been struggling to open vortexes in the right places. Come on, he muttered as sweat gathered around his brow. Vortexes would appear in places that he didn't intend to open them in. The spatial disruption in the surroundings was no joke. As Axaroth turned his attention to him, EE succeeded in creating a vortex that materialized from within one of Axaroth's right leg. Half of Axaroth's right leg was immediately consumed. Axaroth's roar of pain and fury echoed through the hall. "You'll pay for that, child," he bellowed as blood jetted out from his severed limb. He surged forward as his remaining limbs propelled him with terrifying speed toward EE, who began jumping from vortex to evade. Falco, despite his blindness, tried to help. He lashed out with whips of dark energy, each strike vicious and wild. "I am not done," he screamed with pain. The dark energy ripped through the air, severing Alliance core members in two with their screams mingling in the chaos. Falco was still holding back so as not to put the others in danger, and right now more than ever he couldn't go all out. Axaroth blocked the dark energy with his limbs as his focus split. He aimed to finish off Falco, but Endrick and EE combined their efforts to prevent him. Endrick used his telekinesis to hurl debris and create barriers, while EE managed to create vortexes to redirect Axaroth's attacks. The battle raged on. The room was filled with the sounds of clashing powers and anguished cries. Axaroth's strength seemed insurmountable as he brutalized the group with devastating strikes. He caught Endrick with a powerful blow, sending him sprawling to the ground, blood pouring from a deep gash on his side. Ealdris became barely conscious as he tried to summon his strength to help but was crushed under the weight of Axaroth's relentless assault. Falco, body trembling from blood loss and pain, continued to whip his dark energy in desperate arcs. But not of the attacks missed Axaroth, since Falco couldn't exactly aim well with missing eyes. Fortunately, two more of Axaroth's arms were sliced off, but not before he grabbed a Falco's throat to end him. "You've lost," Axaroth hissed in pain while tightening his grip. EE, seeing Falco in mortal danger, unleashed a vortex from Axaroth's waist, severing the powerful Alliance leader in two. "How dare you!" Axaroth, two halves fell to the sides as a fountain of silver blood splurged out. He was still very much alive due to his strength, but his danger level had considerably decreased. Just as it seemed they might gain the upper hand, two more Alliance leaders arrived, their presence as intimidating as Axaroth's. One, a towering figure with skin like molten metal, wielded a blade that crackled with electric energy. The other, a slender alien with eyes that glowed like burning coals, commanded an aura of immense psychic power. "We're not finished yet," Endrick gasped, blood trickling from his mouth as he struggled to his feet. But it was too late. The combined might of the three Alliance leaders overwhelmed them. Ealdris was impaled through the shoulder by the electric blade, his scream of pain cutting through the air. Endrick, trying to protect him, was caught by a psychic blast that shattered his left leg, leaving him crumpled on the ground. Falco, blinded and bleeding, was finally subdued by a crushing blow that knocked him unconscious. EE, his energy depleted, was the last to fall. He fought valiantly, using every ounce of his strength to create vortexes and teleport around the room. But Axaroth's speed and the combined efforts of the other leaders proved too much. EE was struck down by a powerful psychic wave, his body crashing to the floor, barely conscious. "Secure them," Axaroth commanded, his voice cold and unyielding. The Alliance core moved in, binding the battered and broken group with energy restraints. As they were dragged away, the last thing they saw was the grim satisfaction on Axaroth's face. "You thought you could challenge the Alliance? Pathetic." The facility returned to a tense silence, the aftermath of the battle a stark reminder of the power they faced. The Alliance leaders watched as their prisoners were taken to the holding cells, knowing that this was only the beginning of their ordeal. "This isn't working," EE shouted. "We need a new plan." The leader advanced, his energy growing more intense with each step. "It's over. Surrender now, and I might spare your lives." Endrick glanced at his friends, knowing they were running out of options. "We can't give up. There has to be a way." Just as the leader prepared to deliver a final, devastating blow, Endrick remembered something. Falco, Eldris, remember what we learned during training. Combine our attacks. Falco, despite his injuries, nodded. Let's do it. Eldris, his eyes glowing brighter than ever, focused his energy. On my mark. 1, 2, 3. The three of them unleashed their powers simultaneously. Endrick's telekinesis, Falco's dark energy, and Eldris' light manipulation merged into a single, powerful blast aimed directly at the leader. The combined attack struck the leader's shield, and for a moment, it held firm. But then, cracks began to appear, and the shield shattered under the pressure. The leader staggered back, momentarily stunned. EE seized the opportunity, opening a vortex directly beneath the leader. Go! The leader fell through the vortex, and EE quickly closed it, transporting the leader to a distant, uninhabited part of the facility. That won't hold him for long, but it should buy us some time. They hurried towards their spacecraft, their movements fueled by adrenaline and determination. The alarms were still blaring, and they knew more enemies would be on their tail soon. As they approached their ship, they encountered another group of guards, but this time, their resolve was unshakable. Endrick used his telekinesis to clear a path, Falco covered their rear with dark energy blasts, and Eldris used his light manipulation to create barriers and disorient their attackers. EE reached the ship first, opening the hatch and ushering everyone inside. Come on, let's get out of here. They piled into the spacecraft, and EE took the controls, lifting off just as more guards arrived. The ship shot out of the hangar, dodging energy blasts and weaving through the facility's defenses. We're not out of the woods yet, Endrick said, glancing at the sensors. We need to get clear of the facility's range. EE nodded, his focus intense. Working on it. As they soared through space, the facility's defenses continued to target them, but EE's skillful piloting kept them just ahead of the attacks. Finally, they broke free of the facility's range and entered hyperspace, leaving their pursuers behind. They collapsed into their seats, exhausted but relieved. We did it, Eldris said, a faint smile on his face. Endrick nodded. Yeah, but we can't rest yet. We still need to figure out our next move. Falco leaned back, his expression serious. We have Rhea's location now. We need to regroup and come up with a new plan to rescue him. EE glanced at the navigation controls, setting a course for a safe rendezvous point. First things first. Let's find a place to lay low and recover. Then we can figure out our next steps. As the ship hurtled through hyperspace, they knew their mission was far from over. But they had each other, and that gave them the strength to keep fighting. SSS, and I'll gather some supplies for your journey, Uncle Bela added. I need to find a way to send a message. An intergalactic message, Gustav requested. Days had passed since the warp demolator's appearance and subsequent disappearance, leaving Eldris, Endrick, Falco, and Rhea adrift in uncertainty. They had been scouring the coordinates and searching for any trace of Gustav, their efforts fruitless and their morale dwindling. As they prepared to set a course for a nearby planet in hopes of finding assistance, the console beeped loudly, signaling an incoming transmission that immediately drew their attention. Falco, who was closest to the console, quickly tapped to accept the transmission. The familiar face of Gustav appeared in full vibrancy. Hey, guys. The group exchanged looks of relief mixed with confusion upon his appearance. Rival. We've searched everywhere, where did you vanish to? Rhea was the first to yell out. Him on Earth, Gustav revealed. You're on Earth. How did you end up there? Falco voiced in shock. It's Stark's doing. It's a long story, I'll fill you in later. But I'm alright. We thought we lost you. How are you going to get back? Eldris inquired. I'm not coming back just yet. I'm actually about to head to Miss Amy's planet, Aegon. This revelation prompted a round of surprised murmurs among the group. Miss Amy's planet. Why? Endrick voiced in bafflement. It's related to something called the NID, an artifact that pointed me to Aegon. I think it's crucial for what comes next. Since I missed the warp demolator's appearance, this might be the only way I get to planet Humbad. The group listened intently as Gustav briefly explained his encounter with the NID and its mysterious guidance. So, what do you need us to do now? Head to the Milky Way to join you? Aeldris inquired. No, that won't be necessary. You're over a month away, and I can't have you trailing behind that long. Instead, I need you to fix up my ship. I believe by the time you're heading back, I would have gotten what I need. Okay, we could help with other things while you do what needs to be done, Endrick answered with a nod. Thanks. I'll keep you posted on my progress and what I find out on Aegon. As the transmission faded, the crew sat back, processing the flurry of information. Gustav was safe, but the journey ahead was his alone to tread for now. They turned their attention to the task at hand, repairing Gustav's spacecraft and finding their way back without mishaps. We are gonna head for Earth afterwards, right? Rhea asked. You bet we are. Gustav and Stark stood in the dimly lit hangar, their spacecraft prepped and ready for departure. The air thrummed with the low rumble of the engines warming up, a subtle vibration underfoot that spoke of the power at their disposal. Beside them, two bodyguards in silver robes, their features obscured by the high collars and hoods, stood silent and alert. Gustav, checking over his own disguise, a similar silver robe that masked his identity, nodded to Stark. It's time to go. Although Gustav didn't shapeshift due to the numbers seeing Stark off, he wouldn't shy out of it when the time came. Stark, adjusting his own gear, looked at Gustav with a mix of excitement and apprehension. What should I expect out there, Gustav? It's not every day one travels to a planet crafted by a goddess. Honestly, it's hard to say what we'll find. Miss Amy is unpredictable. But if there's one thing I'm sure of, it's that she's continued creating life. She aims to craft a world far different from Earth's, full of diversity and harmony, Gustav responded with a reminiscent look. As they boarded the spacecraft, the bodyguards took their positions at the controls, and Gustav settled next to Stark. The bay doors slowly retracted. With a smooth surge of power, the spacecraft lifted off, leaving Earth's atmosphere in a streak of light. As they ascended, Gustav's mind drifted to his past interactions with Miss Amy. He remembered the lush landscapes she had shown him, teeming with life creatures of her own design, each species more fascinating than the last. Miss Amy stood before a sprawling vista, her hand sweeping over a field dotted with two-headed creatures grazing under a colorful sky. Here, she had said, I will create a sanctuary where all the life forms I create can coexist in balance. A model of what any world could be, free from strife and inequality. Gustav felt a pang of nostalgia and a deep-seated curiosity about how much her world had evolved since his last visit. He pulled himself back to the present as their ship broke free from Earth's gravitational pull and entered the open cosmos. Space travel still amazes me every time, Stark mumbled while peering forward. With his eyes, he could see every nook and cranny of the exterior of the spacecraft. How far until we reach Aegon? Gustav questioned. We're looking at just over a day's journey with the current hyperdrive settings since Aegon is situated at the edge of the Milky Way, Stark answered informatively. The journey through space was smooth, with the vast starlit void offering a display of serene beauty. Stark occasionally attempted to draw out more stories from Gustav, who remained somewhat reticent, lost in his thoughts. You really respect her, don't you? Miss Amy, I mean. More than respect, Stark. I owe her my life. I was hoping I wouldn't need her help anymore until all this was over, but I guess there is no other way, Gustav voiced with a look of admiration and perturbation. As they neared Aegon, the planet's image began to fill the viewport, a colossal world, its surface swirling with vibrant colors and cloud patterns that hinted at its dynamic atmosphere. There it is. Aegon, Gustav announced. Wow, it truly is 4 times the size of Earth. Very breathtaking. To think one being could create all this, it's beyond what I thought possible. Stark couldn't imagine just how powerful Miss Amy was. Although he had very much witnessed her might at Aesop, it was an entirely different scenario to physically be in the presence of an orbital body she created. The spacecraft's approach was carefully calculated, as they prepared for descent. As their spacecraft approached the vibrant, swirling atmosphere of Aegon, Gustav and Stark were suddenly jolted by an unexpected resistance. A shimmering barrier, invisible until now, materialized just as their ship was about to enter the planet's orbit. Stark, startled by the sudden halt, looked over at Gustav with concern. What's happening? Why can't we move forward? Gustav's brow furrowed in confusion and surprise, responded, This wasn't here before. Miss Amy must have later put this in place to prevent external entry. But she should be aware of my presence by now. Why isn't she taking the barrier down? Gustav wondered out loud. It was impossible for anything to pass Miss Amy by since she became a goddess, so Gustav expected her to have sensed their spacecraft long before it got to this point. Trying to understand the situation, Gustav instructed the ship's AI to attempt a gentle push forward, but the barrier remained impassive, its surface repelling every advance with increasing force. Let's not force it. We might damage the ship, or worse, trigger a countermeasure we're not prepared for. Uncle Bela watched in amazement as Gustav interacted with the newly revived NID. The artifact, long dormant and silent within the depths of the Vertigan vaults, now pulsed with a vibrant, mystical energy. Mr. Crimson, to use don't worry, I understand how it works, Gustav cut Uncle Bela off. He proceeded to place his palm flat against the NID, and the device responded immediately, its surface shimmering with an ethereal glow. The rhythmic pulsing seemed to sync with Gustav's own energy, creating a resonance that filled the room with a palpable sense of anticipation. Gustav's thoughts were singular. I need to find a way to get to the remnants of planet Humbad. He held on to this intention, willing the NID to provide a path forward. After a tense few moments, the artifact responded. A projection of shimmering letters floated in the air before them, *** planet Aegon. *** Gustav stepped back, his surprise evident. Aegon? That's the name Miss Amy calls her planet. The room fell silent as the NID powered down, its task seemingly complete. Uncle Bela, breaking the silence, confirmed what the machine had implied. It seems that whatever you need, Gustav, is tied to planet Aegon. According to our ancestors, the NID has never been wrong. Gustav, puzzled, murmured to himself, but why there? What could possibly be on Miss Amy's planet that relates to Humbad or the Warp Demolator? Miss Amy's planet was still a very new one, so it didn't make any sense to him. Stark chimed in, remember, Miss Amy isn't just your former master. She's a creator of worlds, a manipulator of cosmic scales. There is every possibility that she has foresight of the current predicament. The idea resonated with Gustav, but he was still skeptical about it. You might be right. I guess the only way to find out is by heading there. I'll arrange for transport, Stark voiced in response. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,